Yes, it's time for you to clean up the yard. Get outside pronto were the words that echoed from my mother-in-law at my in-law's house. I was always treated like a servant, especially at Christmas. After doing all sorts of housework, I'd find myself locked out in the yard. It was tough at first, but as the son's wife, I eventually accepted it. If I could endure it for a little while, I could go home. That's all I thought about, waiting for time to pass. One Christmas, thanks to my sister-in-law, I had an awakening. My name is Ariel. I'm 27 years old and I work in an office. My husband Tom is 33 years older than me. We've been married for 3 years. I'm an indoor person preferring to relax at home on my days off. I'm not antisocial, just shy and not great with large groups. When I first met Tom, he was kind and reliable. I met him at a drinking party I attended with a friend. I thought it was a small gathering, but there were many strangers, and I wanted to go home right away. Tom was the one who helped me. I didn't know there would be so many people. Let's have a quiet drink over here, he suggested. He's a cheerful person and probably fine with crowds, but he stayed with me, chatting about various things. When it was time to move to the after party, he discreetly said, "It's better to go home now." He let me leave early. Such gatherings often exhaust me, but that day, thanks to him, I wasn't tired and actually had fun. He remained kind and reliable as we dated. As an indoor person, he took me to places I'd never seen before, showing me beautiful views. He was always gentle, escorting me wherever we went. In the 2 years we dated, we never fought. But after marriage, I saw a not-so-kind side of him. Perhaps it was inevitable. No longer just his girlfriend, but his son's wife. When he came home, "Is dinner ready? Can I take a shower?" He'd always ask. I work full-time, though I don't have overtime. Sometimes, depending on when my husband gets home, I can't get dinner or his shower ready in time. "I'll do it now. Just wait a little longer," I tell my husband, always rushing to prepare. If he realized things weren't ready, he'd let out a deep sigh and sit down on the sofa to watch TV. "Oh, beef stew again," he'd remark. I try to prepare in advance or get creative, but if it's the same menu, he gets upset, accusing me of slacking off. Even with simple dishes, my husband never helps. Instead, he leaves his socks under the sofa. He seemed like the epitome of a henpecked husband. We had never lived together before marriage, and I was taken aback by this behavior, as we hadn't experienced this when staying at each other's places. I'm not the most efficient, so while feeling guilty, I kept thinking about how to do household chores more effectively. Apart from this, he was as kind as he always had been. I always thought it was just me failing as his wife. This feeling intensified whenever we visited my in-laws' house. Their house is an hour's drive from ours. I only go a few times a year, but I get so nervous I can't sleep the night before. My father-in-law, Eric, a henpecked husband like my husband, always sits quietly in the same spot, reading the newspaper. "Coffee," I'd often hear him say to Mary, my mother-in-law, as if used to it. Mary prepares the coffee even before being asked and serves it right away. I guess my husband grew up seeing Mary do this and expects the same from me. Eric, being a man of few words, shows little interest in me, barely speaking beyond greetings. Mary is a strong, talkative woman, having been a housewife for years. She efficiently does her chores, probably finding my ineptitude frustrating. When at the in-laws, I cook with Mary, but she often scolds me. "What are you waddling for? Get those vegetables chopped now." I can only reply, "I'm sorry, I'll do it right away." With each visit, I felt increasingly disliked by Mary, always being scolded no matter how careful I tried to be. I blamed myself for not improving. Even when my husband saw me scolded, he said nothing, just lounging around watching TV or fiddling with his phone. Overwhelmed by the constant scolding, I eventually talked to him about it. "You just need to be more efficient. Mom doesn't usually get that angry," he remarked. His words weren't wrong, but they only made me feel more dejected. One day, a year into our marriage, while cooking with Mary as usual, she finally snapped. "I'm so frustrated doing chores with you. I can't take it anymore. From now on, you'll do it alone. I'll just give instructions," she declared. It seemed Mary had reached her limit with me, scolding me every time. "All right, I understand. I'm sorry," was all I could say. Yet again, after apologizing, I ran to the bathroom in tears, feeling pathetic for upsetting Mary so much. I felt terrible for not being a good daughter-in-law. From then on, under Mary's orders, I did all the household chores alone when at the in-laws' house. Even though I worked by myself, Mary's scolding didn't stop. I was always apologizing. Despite my efforts, my husband and Eric just turned a blind eye. Christmas was particularly depressing. My husband has 3 siblings, and his unmarried brother would come home for the holidays. Sally, my sister-in-law, living far away, only comes back once a year and spends her time at her husband's parents' house. Every year on Christmas Eve, Mary cleans the house from top to bottom, prepares roast turkey, and gets ready for the Christmas feast. On Christmas Day, she cooks up a storm and waits for her 2 younger sons to return. The first year, having helped Mary before, now that I was doing chores alone, it meant handling everything. Just thinking about it was overwhelmingly distressing. On the way to the in-laws' house on Christmas Eve, I did the grocery shopping Mary had asked for, and the car was full. Upon arriving and finishing unloading, Mary immediately instructed me to start cleaning the windows. One cleaning task after another followed, along with preparing lunch. By evening, I was exhausted, yet the cleaning wasn't done. "What are you dawdling for? At this rate, we'll have to continue tomorrow." Mary kept scolding me. I was too tired even to apologize. When I finally finished cleaning, it was already dark outside. Then, I started preparing the roast turkey and cleaning up, and before I knew it, it was the next day. I hadn't even started preparing for tomorrow's meal. Sally hadn't instructed me on the preparations. "It needs to be ready by 11 a.m., she said before heading to bed. My husband and Eric had already fallen asleep. I spent the night desperately doing the meal prep. There was so much to do, and as I worked, I couldn't help but cry. Sally probably started cleaning and prepping not just on Christmas Eve, but several days before. It was unreasonable to expect me to do it all alone. I understood that, as a son's wife, I had to accept this, but I couldn't stop crying. Eventually, morning came while I was still prepping, and I had to start cooking right away to be ready by 11 a.m. I finished everything in time, feeling relieved that I managed to get it all done by 11 a.m. "Wow, this looks delicious." "Thanks, Mom," exclaimed the brothers. Their words irked me. Just as I thought I could finally sit down to eat, Mary called me. "What are you sitting down for? It's family time now. You need to clean the yard," Mary said, handing me a broom. I couldn't believe it but had no energy to resist. Silently, I took the broom and went to the yard. From inside the house, I could hear my family chatting and laughing, seemingly uncaring of my absence. The in-laws' house is in the north, and it was freezing that day. I didn't even have time to put on my coat, so I shivered uncontrollably as I tried to clean. Tears and a runny nose wouldn't stop. I kept telling myself it was my duty as a son's wife, just waiting for the time to pass. 3 hours passed before I was allowed back inside. I was so cold I could barely move, but Mary immediately said, "Hurry up with the cleaning." Shivering, I did the dishes. I knew I could go home soon, as my husband had to work from the second day. That thought kept me going. By the time I finished, it was time to leave. I was exhausted, having not slept since the day before. In the car on the way back, I cheerfully told my husband, "Am I going to spend every Christmas like this? I'm tired, cold, and I can't take it anymore." "Just be more efficient, and you can sleep next year. Stick on lots of disposable heating pads. Stop crying. It's bad luck for Christmas." His cold response angered me. I was starting to resent him. No, I think I already disliked him. I had time off until the 3rd, but I got sick from being outside in the cold and spent the rest of my Christmas break in bed. This treatment continued every time I went to the in-laws' house. The next Christmas Eve, I tried to prepare in advance and get more sleep. I even brought lots of disposable heating pads in case I had to go outside. But Mary criticized my pre-made dishes. "This is too salty. Start over," she said, rendering my efforts meaningless. Then she took all the heating pads from my bag. "Oh, disposable heating pads. These will be perfect for church." "Thank you," she said, taking them all. I couldn't sleep again because of the cleaning and cooking. After preparing the meal, I was sent outside to avoid catching a cold again. I wore a down jacket and took the disposable heating pads I had put in my pockets outside. Despite wearing thick clothes and carrying the heating pads, I couldn't stop shivering as it was snowing that day. About an hour later, a little boy came out of the house. "Wow, snow," he exclaimed. I was surprised. There shouldn't be any children inside. "Henry, put on your gloves," Mary called out. It turned out Sally had arrived unbeknownst to me while I was outside. Sally and her child had come to the in-laws' house. Apparently, she had a fight with her husband and didn't go to his parents' house this year. It was the first time I'd seen her since our wedding 3 years ago. When Sally saw me, she was surprised. Is that you, Ariel? She greeted. Hello, Sally. It's been a while. I greeted her, still shivering. Concerned about me trembling, Sally gave me some disposable heating pads from her pocket. Goodness, you're shivering. Why are you outside all this time? She asked, warming my hands. I was asked to clean the yard as the son's wife, I explained. I answered, and Sally, looking angry, said, What? What do you mean? Come inside, and you too, Henry. She ushered me into the house. Sally approached my husband and the others who were chatting. Hey, what's this about? Ariel was shivering. What if something had happened? She asked forcefully. Mom just asked her to clean the yard. My husband replied nonchalantly. Tom, you don't see anything wrong with this. And Mom, what's this about? Sally confronted my husband and her mother. Eric pretended not to know, and the two brothers-in-law looked uncomfortable. A son's wife should do what's expected of her. I just had her do her duties, Sally's mother replied sulkily. There's no such thing as a son's wife's duties in this world. How can you, a former daughter-in-law, not understand? You don't even realize how horrible this is. This is awful. I will never forgive you, and not just you, everyone here, Sally said, and left the in-laws' house with her child. I stayed at a nearby hotel. While soaking in the pool, I told her everything. Sally, too, had been harshly treated by her mother-in-law and listened to me with tears. Ariel, you've been treated like a slave, haven't you? It's been tough. You don't have to endure it anymore. You can be free, she hugged me. I had always thought it was inevitable as a son's wife and endured many hardships, but finally, I realized it was abnormal. Feeling liberated, I also cried. Spending time with Sally, I felt the need to become stronger. After getting out of the pool, we ate the delicious hotel food, and exhausted from not sleeping since Christmas Eve, I fell asleep without realizing it. The next morning, I saw missed calls from my husband but ignored them, choosing to explore the area around the hotel with Sally and her child. Throughout this, my husband and Mary kept calling. Ariel, it's okay to ignore him, Sally advised, so I didn't answer the phone and enjoyed sightseeing instead. Later that evening, when Sally said she was going home, I drove her to the station. As we said goodbye, Ariel, I've done enough payback for you. The rest is up to you, she told me. I didn't fully understand. Thank you for everything. I thanked her deeply and went home. When I got home, my husband was there, demanding, Hey, where have you been? I called you so many times. Ignoring his frantic concern, he continued, The house has been sold. It's my sister's doing. Confused, I asked, What? Sally? Sally has married the heir of a national real estate company. Our house and the in-laws' house were bought through Sally's husband's company. The two brothers-in-law rented through the same company, he explained. Sally, unable to forgive what happened yesterday, have listed our house and the in-laws' house for sale and filed eviction notices for the brothers' rentals. Within a month, the entire family had to move out, losing their home. I laugh at Sally's extraordinary actions, touched that she did all this for me. You know about this, right? Tell my sister to stop. She'll listen to you, my husband pressed. Laughing, I responded, I'll talk to Mom. He called Mary. It was hard to hear, but she sounded angry. It's called personal responsibility. I'm leaving this house too, so it doesn't matter to me if there's no house. The family can live happily outside, right? Like in a tent? It might be cold and shivering. I teased while saying this to my husband and Mary on the phone. What are you talking about? My husband exclaimed. The joke's on me. I'll send you the divorce papers, I said, packed, and went to my parents' house. I called Sally on the way to tell her I was divorcing. Way to go, Ariel. I knew you'd make that choice. Let's go to a hotel with a pool again, she said cheerfully. I'm grateful to Sally. If she hadn't come that day, I would have endured terrible treatment for decades. Later, we officially got divorced. My ex-husband's family lost their homes. We used to split living expenses and manage our own savings, which I didn't know, but apparently he had hardly any. He had to borrow money for a new house. He was blamed by the in-laws and borrowed more for their initial costs. After the divorce, his debts grew, and he started working part-time at night. Serves him right. The in-laws had lived in a spacious house thanks to Sally, but now had to settle for a small apartment. Embarrassed, Sally rarely leaves the house, living quietly. I started living at my parents' house. When I helped with chores, Mom was surprised at my efficiency. I thought I was clumsy and hadn't grown, but I was wrong. I became skilled in household chores during my 3-year marriage. Sally and I still keep in touch and occasionally visit hotels with pools. Talking to her gives me strength. Becoming the strong woman like Sally is my goal.
I've officially transferred the ownership of our house to my parents, and we're contemplating divorce. James, with a cold demeanor, pointed at me and callously insisted that I leave the house. He unleashed a stream of insults, supported by his parents' cheerful smiles, who seemed to silently endorse his actions. Nevertheless, I remained unfazed by their words, calmly accepting the decision to leave. Inside me, a well-thought-out plan accompanied the luggage I had prepared in advance. Hand in hand, I departed from the house without hesitation. They were oblivious to the gravity of the situation awaiting them. My name is Sally, just turned 50. Many years have passed since our marriage. Our children are now independent, leading lives away from us. I used to live the life of an ordinary salaried worker, but now, thanks to a friend's introduction, I spend my days as a teacher of handmade accessories, a hobby turned profession. This new job has become a turning point in my life, bringing fulfillment through interactions with my students and the joy of crafting every day. Some might have negative opinions about turning a hobby into a livelihood, but I am content. James and I met by chance at the company where I used to work. He was employed at a client company at the time, and as we started to meet often through work-related social gatherings, our relationship deepened. Eventually, we chose to marry out of love. After 3 years of marriage, our family was blessed with a healthy and energetic boy. He graduated from a well-known university and is now happily married, living a prosperous life. However, despite our son's success, the relationship between James and me became increasingly difficult to find joy in. Over the years, James underwent a transformation, displaying changes in behavior. The once gentle and considerate James became demanding, treating me like nothing more than a housemaid. His daily changing demands and preferences became a source of trouble for me. Lately, James has been easily angered, blaming me for trivial things, and instances of verbal abuse have been on the rise. I've been wanting to escape this life and start anew, but I'm tied down by an unpaid mortgage. Despite this, James quit his job without a clear reason and now spends his days lazing around the house. He hardly lifts a finger to help with daily chores, leaving me to manage everything on my own. The house we live in was recently rebuilt, and I funded it all. Managing the finances, I saved bit by bit for its reconstruction. It embodies my wishes and aspirations, a house I worked hard to build. I don't want it to fall into James's hands if I leave. Beyond the mortgage issue, this house symbolizes my dreams, with features like the spacious kitchen area reflecting my careful choices. Despite initial input from James on the house's design, I covered all the costs and wanted my wishes to be respected. Despite facing challenges, the house, with all its desired features, eventually became a reality, fulfilling our dream. I experienced a profound sense of joy about the reality of our new home. However, the cost of construction significantly surpassed our initial estimates, compelling us to take on a much larger loan than anticipated. Accepting such a substantial loan in our 50s was unexpected, but the prospect of the happiness our new home promised provided us with the energy to overcome this financial burden. On the flip side, James appeared somewhat sulky, as his opinions and wishes were not well reflected in the house design. He expressed discontent, considering it unnecessary and akin to throwing money down the drain. Ignoring his complaints and grumbles, I pressed on. Gradually, he stopped talking to me and began resorting to childish behaviors, such as scattering trash and leaving things disorganized to provoke irritation. I wondered when this situation, this life, would come to an end, pondering these thoughts every day. A few months had passed since we moved into the new house when suddenly the doorbell rang. We weren't expecting any visitors that day, leaving me curious about who it might be. As I prepared to go to the front door, James, surprisingly, got up and headed there before me, possibly aware of the visitor's identity. After a while, cheerful voices and laughter emanated from the entrance. When the door to the living room slowly opened, revealing the visitors, I saw the faces of my unexpected in-laws, Harold and Alice. Honestly, I always felt pressure in my relationship with them. When we first announced our marriage, they treated me coldly, criticized me for my lower social status, and maintained an awkward attitude even on our wedding day. Their interference continued post-marriage, and each time I interacted with them, I wondered how to handle the situation. Despite thinking there had been some change or settling down due to lack of contact, their sudden visit surprised me. Greeting them politely, I felt a slight tension, but they passed by me without a word, intentionally ignoring my presence and bumping into my shoulder. They marveled at the house, expressing envy at the spacious and user-friendly kitchen. James proudly showcased the house to his in-laws, and upon their return, the expressions on their faces seemed satisfied. However, James' expression turned stern, and he suddenly raised his voice in anger towards me, instructing me to hurry up and prepare tea and snacks. Overwhelmed by his words, I hastily prepared tea and served snacks, but his parents seemed dissatisfied, commenting on the hospitality. Despite my efforts, Harold expressed dissatisfaction, and as they quickly finished the snacks and tea, he commented appreciatively on the house's interior. James, with a broad smile, invited his parents to live together in the house, almost ignoring my presence. They listened to James's words and left, leaving me watching their retreating figures. I felt a significant gap between James and me, witnessing him chatting and laughing joyfully with his parents, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Subsequently, in response to James' invitation, his parents began visiting our house more frequently. Initially, it was a few times a month, but it gradually increased to several times a week, eventually becoming almost daily. However, their criticisms towards me never ceased, and James showed no signs of curbing them. James' attitude of blaming me, coupled with his parents' intensified disapproval, became more pronounced. His complaints about me not listening and causing our son suffering were relentless. Despite facing daily difficulties, I found myself unable to voice the frustration in my heart. All I could do was offer words of apology. The in-laws' visits increased beyond anticipation, and they started visiting even more frequently during my absence. They would come along with James, leaving clear evidence of their activities at home: scattered beer cans, empty bottles, and traces of spilled alcohol that seeped into our new rug. Despite my protests, the new house began to smell of alcohol and felt dirty. I couldn't understand why, despite not contributing to the household, James was quick to complain. His involvement in gambling added another layer of worry, as remnants of used betting slips surfaced regularly. Explaining the risks of gambling and its impact on our finances seemed futile. The losses were a significant blow, especially since the money used for gambling was hard-earned through my tireless work. Nearly a month into the frequent visits from the in-laws, they targeted the times when I was out. One day, returning home early, I found them leisurely spending time in our house. Surprised, I confronted them, but their snarky words and indifferent attitude made it clear that they considered my presence bothersome. Frustrated and stressed by the insolent attitudes of James and his parents, I realized I had reached my limit. Instead of succumbing to emotions, I decided it was time to devise a plan to address the situation. Amidst this turmoil, an unusual event occurred. During a time when I was supposed to be away, the in-laws visited unexpectedly, expressing surprise at their unusual timing. I sarcastically commented on their avoidance of my presence. Ignoring my remark, they boldly entered the house. James welcomed them with a smile, leading them to inspect various areas, from the kitchen to the bathroom. Observing their meticulous checks, I sensed a hidden agenda behind their actions. Even as they left, they wore satisfied expressions, as if they had confirmed something. Curious and wary, I questioned their inspections and wondered if there was something they should tell me. I had cautioned James not to worry, emphasizing that it was none of his business. His behavior, however, hinted at concealing something from me. I suspected he was trying to manipulate me cunningly, but grasping the real intention proved challenging. Observing the situation became my only option. Then, one day after work, I returned home to find a large moving truck parked in front of our house, bearing the logo of a company named Moving Center. James appeared to be in discussions with the truck driver and representatives. When our eyes met, he pretended not to see me and disappeared inside the house. What shocked me more was the simultaneous arrival of my in-laws. They greeted me casually, and James welcomed them, leading them into the house. The atmosphere felt tense, and as I followed them inside, I noticed a significant change. The familiar furniture and belongings I knew had vanished, replaced by my in-laws' dated furniture, arranged as if this were their home. As I sat down on the sofa, they surrounded me with smirky smiles, conveying a sense of smugness. Their behavior indicated a pre-planned action, and though anxious, I decided to quietly wait and see what would unfold. The somewhat hurried gazes of my in-laws added to the atmosphere. They declared that there was something they needed to tell me, hinting at a hidden agenda. Bracing myself, I responded with feigned calmness, and James sighed deeply before admitting that he had sold the house to his parents. He proposed getting a divorce, and my in-laws nodded in agreement. Their smirky smiles suggested they were trying to toy with me. Despite the revelation, I remained unfazed, having anticipated their plan. I promptly signed the divorce papers, placed my wedding ring on the table, and declared my intention to leave the house. I had suspicions about the unnatural behaviors of James and my in-laws, especially since their frequent visits when I wasn't home. To confirm my suspicions, I installed surveillance cameras around the house, synced with my smartphone. On the first day, I observed their daily conversations. However, one day, I stumbled upon footage where James and his parents joyfully discussed selling the house. Shocked by this revelation, I decided to plan my next steps, searching for a new residence based on the information obtained from the surveillance cameras. I took the initiative to transfer the home loan from my name to James's. If they planned to remove me from our home, I believed they should take over the mortgage payments and responsibilities. The monthly mortgage, amounting to $1,900, was paid from my hard-earned salary. Doubting that James and his parents could afford this, I resolved not to provide any financial assistance. Free from the troublesome relationship, I moved to my new, well-arranged home with new furniture, ready to embark on a new chapter in my life. On my day off, I relished the prospect of thorough rest, sleeping in past noon. As I was about to doze off again, the doorbell abruptly rang. To my surprise, James and his in-laws stood at my doorstep, uninvited. I questioned their presence, and without answering, they intruded into my house, spreading out a document in front of me. They accused me of changing the name on the house loan without permission. Expressing disbelief at their sudden appearance, I learned that right after leaving the house, they received documents about the loan name change. James and his parents were shocked, claiming they were currently unemployed and couldn't afford the high monthly loan. In a furious outburst, James declared they wouldn't pay that amount. Attempting to enlighten them on the consequences of defaulting, I explained how interest and late fees could significantly increase the final payment. James initially seemed skeptical, but after searching for information online, his expression turned to one of shock and distress. I recommended looking for new employment for a fresh start. Their faces grew even paler as they realized the seriousness of the situation. They admitted to having no savings or assets, with James burdened by substantial gambling debts and no stable income. Frustrated, they pleaded for understanding and assistance, emphasizing the years they spent together. Unmoved by their pleas, I shut the door to escape their attempts to mend the relationship. Frustrated, they reported me to the police, leading to their removal from my property. Eventually, due to financial constraints, they relocated to a more affordable apartment on the outskirts of town. James secured a part-time job, supporting his family with that income. Meanwhile, my life remained unchanged, and I focused on my job. In my free time, I started a blog on handmade crafts, gaining attention and doubling my monthly income. Requests for me to serve as an instructor for workshops and courses increased. I had no thoughts of remarrying and planned to navigate life independently. Discovering an old household account book from the early days of my marriage brought back memories of our financial struggles. With a sense of resolve, I decided to build a new happiness on my own, placing the account book back on the shelf.
If you don't want a divorce, get out of this house right now, all right? These words came suddenly from my husband. Obviously, I was taken aback. He must have been quite confident that I wouldn't file for divorce to go to such lengths to intimidate me. When I couldn't take it anymore, I decided to seek advice from someone else. My name is Anna. I'm a 30-year-old office worker. My husband James and I are about to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary. We're still waiting for the blessing of a child, which has led to a constant barrage of questions from my mother-in-law about when she can expect grandchildren. My father-in-law passed away years ago. My mother-in-law lives on the inheritance he left behind. Honestly, I feel on the verge of a nervous breakdown with her constant prodding about grandchildren. Actually, I might already be there. Despite seeing me like this, my husband James doesn't lift a finger to help. In fact, he recently started siding with his mother, blaming me for our troubles. I used to adore him for his kindness when we were dating. But after we got married, his attitude completely changed. Without any consultation, he decided we would live near his childhood home. When James is off from work, I am summoned to his parents' house and made to do housework all day long. Of course, there are no breaks. While I'm busy with chores at his parents' house, the two of them either go out together or stay in watching TV and laughing. I was even yelled at once for making too much noise with the vacuum cleaner. After that, I was forbidden to use it and was told to clean with a broom and a rag instead. Then, my sister-in-law moved back home. She was originally living in a neighboring town, but due to some personality conflict, she had recently moved back. Her return has only added to my burden. She has a 4-year-old daughter and expects me to make her kindergartner's lunch every day. When I tell her that it's impossible because of my job, I get yelled at by my mother-in-law, saying, "Your sister-in-law is dealing with the aftermath of a divorce." My husband says, "Don't you want to be useful to the family?" And my sister-in-law herself says, "It'll be good practice for when you have a child of your own, so you should be thankful." So I end up waking up at 4 a.m. every morning, making my niece's lunchbox and breakfast for my in-laws, then head back to my place, finish my own housework, and go to work. That's the brutal routine I've been forced into. My husband, of course, doesn't lift a finger to help with any household chores. The only time I get to rest is during my break time at work. One day, after living this exhausting routine for a while, my husband dropped a bombshell on me. "Oh, by the way, Anna, you should quit your job. I've talked it over with my mom and sister. You know she's going through a rough time. You understand, right?" "No, I don't get what you're saying. Listen, I mean quit your job and take care of the house," he snapped at me before storming off to take a bath. I couldn't see the connection between my sister-in-law's divorce and me quitting my job. My husband is stuck in a dead-end job, and there are months. When I earn more than him, does he really think he'd live off his salary alone? Neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law work. I can't understand why they can't handle the housework. Feeling like I couldn't handle any more of this, I grabbed my car keys and drove off to one place that came to mind. That place was my childhood home, a bit far from the apartment we live in now. My parents had moved overseas, and no one currently lived there. Because my parents are the worrying type, I couldn't bring myself to talk to them about the matter. Whenever something unpleasant happened, I'd come here. This is my home, filled with precious memories. As I was lost in these thoughts, my phone rang. It was my husband. "Hey, I just got to the bath and you're gone. Are you back at your parents' place again?" "Yes, so what? Could you stop running back home every time something goes wrong?" His words simply didn't resonate. "I'll be working from here for a while, and no, I won't go to your parents' house either." Defeated by his forcefulness, I returned to our house. Afterwards, I quit my beloved job in the fashion industry. My clueless coworkers speculated I might be pregnant. I was given no free time, made to manage the household all day. Even when I caught a cold and ran a high fever, no one seemed to care. I had become a servant in this house, a slave to put it bluntly. However, one day amidst this lifestyle, something happened. Guess what? My sister-in-law was getting remarried. Moreover, her fiancé was an executive at a major corporation, earning a substantial income. It was quite a shock. My sister-in-law isn't exactly a beauty, and her personality leaves a lot to be desired. I understood everyone has different tastes and there are all sorts of people out there. The entire in-law family was celebrating, shouting about how she was marrying into money. My sister-in-law, full of pride, showed me a photo of the man. Huh, this man, I thought, looking at the photo. When my husband said something unbelievable. Because of this, Anna, your parents' house will become my sister's family place. I was stunned. Wait a minute, that house is what my parents left for me. It's not for you to decide. The whole family has decided. You, who lives off my money, don't have a say in this, he retorted. Was the person standing in front of me a devil in human skin? That house was left for me by my father, a place for me to live if I ever had children. James should know this. Why can he act so selfishly? My heart was at its limit. As if to add insult to injury, my mother-in-law said, "You can't even give us a grandchild. Can't you be useful around the house for once?" There was no one on my side in this house. I returned home, packed a few belongings, and headed to my parents' house. I made a firm decision in my heart. I would never go back. A few days later, having received no calls from my husband, I thought he might have reconsidered. Then suddenly, the doorbell rang. Standing there were my husband and sister-in-law. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "We thought we should take a look around," my sister-in-law said, barging in. Despite my pleas for them to stop, they ignored me, snooping around the house, treating me as if I was invisible. "This house is pretty nice too. Good for you, Anna," my sister-in-law remarked. "And when do you plan to move out of this house, Anna? My sister's wedding is coming up soon." "Get it together," my husband said, unchanged as I stayed silent. My husband added, "If you don't want to get divorced, leave now." Confident that I wouldn't divorce him, my husband was grinning with my sister-in-law looking my way. "Got it," I said. Once I confirmed, my husband seemed pleased, saying it's all he wanted to hear. Apparently, under the guise of celebrating my sister-in-law's wedding, they are planning a long family-only trip starting tomorrow. Naturally, I'm not included in this little escapade. My husband told me to pack up and leave by the time they get back. Then, he and my sister-in-law left with an excited air about them, watching their backs. 2 weeks later, the day for my in-laws to return from their trip arrived, and my phone began ringing incessantly. The caller was my husband, with calls also from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law mixed in. Unable to ignore the constant noise any longer, I finally answered the call. "Hey Anna, where the hell are you?" my husband demanded. "I'm at home," I replied. "You're lying. You're not at the apartment or at your parents' place. And what's the meaning of this? Your family house has a for sale sign." "Yes, I put it up for sale." "What are you talking about?" he asked, clearly caught off guard. "Well, after your mockery, I gave it some thought. The house you're living in now just seems so dirty to me. I prefer cleanliness. After all, I'm divorcing you." "Don't mess with me," my husband yelled. That was going to be my line. "Let's let our lawyers handle it from here." With that, I hung up on him while he was still shouting. On the day my husband and sister-in-law returned, I had already been in touch with a certain person, a friend of my father's who runs a real estate company. Though I had no prior experience selling houses, he offered me guidance and we managed to strike a good deal. As a side note, the apartment we had been living in was in my name since my husband couldn't pass the screening process. I had no intention of staying there, so I canceled the lease while they were away and sent all of my husband's belongings to his parents' house, cash on delivery. Even after that, I continued to receive calls from my in-laws, which I completely ignored. I recorded all the unpleasant messages they left on my voicemail. According to my lawyer, my husband was hesitant, even though he initially wanted a divorce. It seemed he was reluctant to lose his maid. I anticipated a lengthy battle. But then my husband suddenly agreed to divorce. My lawyer told me that my husband, mother-in-law, and sister-in-law abruptly showed up at his office, insisting that he divorce me and process it quickly. My husband had been wavering on the divorce, but my mother-in-law convinced him that since my sister-in-law's new husband was wealthy, they could afford to hire a new housekeeper and get rid of me, the barren wife, and find a younger, newer spouse. With that, my husband agreed to the divorce. Moreover, they offered to pay a small settlement on the condition that I would not get involved with them any longer. I thought that was supposed to be my line, but I decided to accept what was offered. Not long after, my sister-in-law got remarried. For a while after that, life was quiet. Taking care of myself was so much easier than I thought. I deeply regretted not divorcing sooner. Well, I'm finally free, time to enjoy my new life. Just as I was beginning to embrace this thought, an incident happened out of nowhere. My in-laws showed up at my new home. The moment I opened the door, they barged in, and my ex-husband demanded, "We need to talk. Sit down." Despite wondering who they thought they were, I took a seat. Then he said, "Come back home. We forgive you." Unable to close my gaping mouth, I answered, "Excuse me?" I wanted them to leave immediately, so I teased, "Oh, are you talking about your sister's husband? Has he disappeared?" The three of them widened their eyes as if to say, "Why do you know about that?" and stared at me. "What do you know?" "Something. After we registered our marriage, he suddenly disappeared. We can't contact him," my mother-in-law added, with a hint of excitement. On top of that, he ran off with her family's fortune. "Was this your doing? You've brought us such terrible fortune, daughter-in-law." She looked as if she would attack me at any moment. Tired of their baseless accusations, I decided it was time to set the record straight. I decided to reveal a truth to them. "Wow, I didn't realize your sister liked hamburgers so much." "What are you talking about? Hamburgers all of a sudden? Don't you know your sister's husband isn't some executive at a major company? He's just a part-timer at a hamburger shop." The sister-in-law froze, rendered speechless. I continued my story. In my single days, my friend and I loved visiting different hamburger shops. There was one favorite shop where a certain employee always made mistakes and got yelled at by the manager. That man happened to be your sister-in-law's husband. Once I started dating my husband, he told me no more hamburgers, so I gave up my hobby. When your sister-in-law proudly showed me her husband's photo, I recognized him but decided it wasn't my place to interfere and stayed silent. When I showed her the shop's homepage as proof, she stared intently at her husband's picture in the background. By the way, I visited the shop recently with a friend, but her husband was no longer there. He probably left town. That's marriage fraud. It seems that's what they call it. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said. The mother-in-law, who had been silent, interjected, "You knew and you didn't tell us? We took care of you for years, even though you couldn't have children. You owe us." At her nonsensical rant, I decided to reveal another truth I had been keeping. "First of all, I'm not the reason we couldn't have kids. Maybe my ex-husband can explain that to you." The mother-in-law looked at her son in shock, and he guiltily lowered his gaze. "When we couldn't conceive after our marriage, we decided to get tested at your insistence. The doctor confirmed there was nothing wrong with me, but my husband had a very low sperm count. The reason we couldn't have children was because of him." When the mother-in-law asked about the test results, my husband instantly lied, claiming I was the problem. I was angry, but they just said nonsensical things like, "You have to support your husband." Refusing to face the truth, my ex-husband joined forces with my mother-in-law, pinning all the blame on me. In the end, he admitted, "Look, I admit I was wrong. Once the house sells, we'll get a good chunk of money. Let's all live happily as a family again." "Well, we've been through a lot, but let's get along from now on," my mother-in-law chimed in. At the end of the day, I realized they probably came here today with the intention of getting their hands on my money. What a disgusting lot. "No chance I'm getting back together with you, and I don't consider any of you family," I declared. Upon hearing this, my ex-husband retorted, "Getting a little big for your boots now, aren't you? I know even if you sold the house, you hardly have any savings. How do you plan to survive?" It seemed he had sneaked a peek at my bank account during my single days, and now he had this smug look on his face, as if to say, "Now that you know, do as you're told." To poke fun at my situation, the three of them were smirking at me, so I decided to enlighten them with a little truth. "Sure, my savings aren't that much, as I've told you, but instead, I've invested in stocks, enough to live without working for the next few years at least." Their faces looked like they wanted to say, "No way," as they stared at me. Actually, since I was a child, my father was interested in stocks and investments. He had a knack for foreseeing things, and I inherited those skills and built up a decent amount of wealth. The money that supported my parents' move abroad was all from those successful investments, of course. I had kept this secret from my money-grubbing ex-family. Seeing their disappointed faces, I asked, "You can leave now." "Oh, what was it again?" "It's in our divorce conditions. If we approach each other without reason in the future, either party will have to pay a penalty. Are you going to pay, or should I call the police for trespassing?" The word police scared them off, and they left in a hurry. I immediately consulted my lawyer about the day's events and was told to contact him if the ex-family tried to get close again. As expected, once they knew I had assets, my ex-husband sent me a ton of messages begging to reconcile. Nostalgic photos of places we'd been on dates, creepy messages like "I'm here right now thinking about those days" arrived almost daily. I thought about blocking him but kept everything as evidence just in case. And yes, I wondered how he managed to text me all day while supposedly working, but I didn't really care. But when he started trying to contact my friends, I decided enough was enough and sent him a message. "I'll go to the police if this continues." I sent him a photo of our divorce agreement and the nearest police station along with the message. After that, the messages stopped and I never heard from my ex-husband again. I thanked my lawyer and he dropped a bombshell. Apparently, my ex-husband planned to live off his sister's new husband and had quit his job when she remarried. He was a fool for leaving a decent job at a decent company. "You asked for the documents. They should be arriving soon," I told my lawyer. I had placed another request with a lawyer separately from this matter. Soon after we were married, I felt something was off. My precious personal belongings were slowly disappearing. First, it was a necklace that I bought myself when I was single. Then a fountain pen my parents had given me as a job-starting present. Bags, rings, and above all, the fountain pen were something I cherished greatly. When I talked to my husband about it, he yelled, "Don't worry about losing things." Suspicious, I installed a surveillance camera without telling my husband. What it captured was my husband and mother-in-law rummaging through my closet grinning. Once my sister-in-law moved back in, the footage showed 3 people instead of 2. Taking advantage of my silence, their actions escalated. They were selling my personal belongings surreptitiously for money, fueling their actions. They probably saw the balance in my bank book at that time. It continued until the divorce, so I collected plenty of physical evidence. Just as they thought I wouldn't claim anything, I filed for damages and compensation for emotional distress due to their actions. They must be panicking right now, but it's their own doing. As for what happened to the 3 of them, my sister-in-law's ex-husband found out about this incident, and it seems he took custody of their daughter. Seeing how my sister-in-law didn't seem to care for her daughter, I felt relieved. Just a while ago, I saw the daughter-in-law with her ex-husband, happily holding hands and shopping. She had a happy smile on her face, something I never saw when she was at my in-laws. The 3 of them, who wanted to live comfortably, apparently applied for welfare, but they were naturally refused as they were healthy and nothing else. As for my husband, his pride kept him from finding another job. Eventually, he went to his old workplace and begged on his knees, but they had been hoping for him to quit and ended up calling the police, which he hated. He had to work, but it seems he could only find day labor jobs. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law had to pay me compensation, so they both started part-time jobs at a nearby supermarket. But the 2 of them, who had hardly worked before, are struggling with the unfamiliar work. Maybe it's a coincidence, but since they started, the supermarket sales have dropped significantly. They got quite a strong nickname, the plague-bringing mother and daughter. By the way, the marriage camera is still at large. I thought they owned the house they were living in, but it was actually a rental. Unable to pay the rent, the 3 of them moved to a rundown apartment that was infamous in the neighborhood. Their living is hand-to-mouth, and it seems they're always fighting. The other day, the police were called because their fighting was too loud. As for me, thanks to their help, I sold the house and used the money as capital to start a new apparel company with a colleague from my old job. Recently, we've been gaining more customers and even featured in magazines and TV. Being able to return to the job I love is the happiest thing for me. Oh, and there's one more thing. I've met a man through work, and we're getting married. His parents and siblings are very kind, and they've been treating me very well. What's more, we're expecting a baby, and I'll be the mother I've always dreamed of being. Next year, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life right now.
Emily sneered at me after I announced my resignation, and I responded by maintaining a silent, steady gaze. Our conversation had revolved around the company's decision to cut labor costs, with particular disdain aimed at those supposedly exploiting overtime pay. Tom, too, seemed to relish the notion of trimming expenses. A week later, my phone incessantly rang with calls from the company. Upon answering, the president inquired sharply, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but scoff mockingly at the president's question. In response, I introduced myself as Lily Johnson, a 59-year-old employee with 37 years of dedicated service since my college graduation. I explained our company's role in providing administrative services, particularly catering to busy company presidents handling clerical work. Specializing in tax-related matters, I proudly managed 45 clients, a responsibility that had grown overwhelming despite the assistance of a part-timer. Despite the challenges, I couldn't show any sign of weakness. Our clients were long-standing relationships, and their adversities fueled my determination. Today, as I sat in front of my computer, the relentless harassment from Tom and Emily weighed heavily on my mind. Tom, 7 years my junior and now the head of the tax department, had drastically changed his demeanor 3 months ago upon promotion. His once polite tone was replaced with condescension and complaints, making every interaction a struggle. Even when I countered, he remained unfazed, instructing me to consult the manual for guidance and warning against unnecessary actions. Emily, Tom's assistant, joined in the harassment, criticizing my efficiency and mocking my rank and file status. Despite being the first to decline a promotion to department head, a fact unknown to Tom and Emily, I committed to completing my regular duties. Their harassment persisted, with Tom accusing me of increasing overtime, branding it a waste. Emily echoed his sentiment, sighing as she claimed my constant overtime was dragging down the entire tax department's performance. The recent cause of my overtime was Tom unexpectedly leaving a month's worth of client files on my desk to be filed by the end of the month after work. My face drained of color as I glanced at the files before me. "Wait, these all have deadlines this month, right?" I uttered in confusion. However, before I could grasp the gravity of the situation, Tom was already packing up his desk, completely uninterested in addressing my concerns. "I'm heading out. Take care with that," he casually remarked as he swiftly left the office, leaving me with a pile of urgent tasks. Emily followed suit, adding insult to injury with a mocking laugh. The incredulity of the situation weighed on me, and I sighed heavily as I opened the client files scattered on my desk. To my dismay, some of the files were originally Emily's responsibility. The realization deepened my sigh. I understood why Tom had been subjecting me to relentless harassment. They wanted me to retire quickly. My extensive experience and deeper knowledge in taxation made me a preferred resource for other members of the tax department over Tom. Tom's unapproachable demeanor and unattractive appearance made everyone, except Emily, avoid him. It seemed Emily's proximity to him was strategic, driven by Tom's preference for younger female employees. The shallow nature of their thinking sent a chill down my spine. Emily's harassment was not just a personal vendetta. She aimed to curry favor with Tom, the one evaluating the tax department's performance. Despite these challenges, I had to manage the declarations. Alongside preparing tax declarations for my assigned companies, it seemed today's workload was far from over. However, claiming overtime would only invite complaints from Tom and Emily, leaving me resigned to the prospect of unpaid extra hours. Then, unexpectedly, I received a summons to the president's office. Our company had recently undergone a change in leadership due to the former president's sudden illness. The new president, the former president's son, wasn't fully acquainted with our company. As I entered the office, I noticed Tom and Emily with unpleasant smirks on their faces. In a tense atmosphere, the president dropped a bombshell. "Lily, we'll need you to resign by the end of this month." My mind spun as I asked for clarification. Tom and Emily had apparently accused me of overbilling for overtime, citing that while others had around 15 hours, I had exceeded 80 hours. The president, oblivious to the true circumstances, seemed impressed with Tom and Emily's zero overtime. The reality of the situation hit me. The inflated overtime was a result of doing Tom and Emily's work. However, revealing Tom's instructions would risk portraying it as my own inability to manage time effectively. I presented the facts, asserting that I hadn't overbilled for overtime but struggled to finish my workload within regular hours. The president sighed deeply, expressing doubt but acknowledging the lack of evidence to pursue the matter further. Nevertheless, he insisted that they couldn't retain someone working at such a slow pace. Resigned to the situation, the president suggested my resignation, and it seemed his mind was made up. Told to leave the company I had devoted 37 years to, I felt a weariness settle in. Despite my dedication, the additional workload from Tom and Emily went unappreciated. I agreed to resign at the end of the month, acknowledging that I had already communicated my decision to the president. As I glanced at Tom and Emily, their vulgar smiles reflected satisfaction. Leaving the president's office, Emily taunted me with a sarcastic, "Thanks for quitting," her sneer cutting through. I responded with a silent stare, facing similar disdain from Tom, who shared his approval of cutting labor costs and labeled me as someone exploiting overtime pay. Observing their cheerful conversation, I pondered the handover process. Creating documents for all my clients, I ensured proper farewells and appointments with those I could meet personally. Unable to schedule a meeting with the president, I resorted to letters to inform them of my successor. A week post-resignation, enjoying a moment of relaxation at home, my mobile phone rang. Seeing the company's call, I hesitated, having already completed social insurance procedures. However, persistent calls from both the company and Tom and Emily's personal mobiles led me to answer reluctantly. As I picked up, the president urgently spoke, asking, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but mockingly reply, "Just an unemployed lady who resigned from the company, nothing else." In response, the president urgently explained the chaos since my departure, 49 calls to stop transactions with the company. He pleaded for my immediate return, revealing a sense of panic in his tone. Reluctantly, I rose from my seat and made my way back to the company. Upon my arrival, I found Tom and Emily waiting, their faces notably pallid and dark circles underlining their weary eyes. Surprised by their drastic change in appearance, I inquired about what was happening. Tom glared at me and revealed, "Since you left, we've been bombarded with calls to stop transactions, not just from your clients but also from prospective companies we were planning to introduce." "What did you do?" Emily echoed the suspicion, expressing disillusionment at the thought of me resorting to underhanded tactics. Their haggard appearance suggested the toll handling cancellations. While I had not manipulated the clients, I had a hunch about the reason behind the transaction halts. Considering the inevitability of cancellations, I mumbled my thoughts aloud. Tom, however, accused me outright, insisting I had orchestrated something. He demanded I go to the president's office immediately, forcefully escorting me there. Upon entering the president's office with Tom and Emily, the president greeted me with a direct look in his eyes. Tom declared, "President, I brought her," with an air of authority, while Emily hurriedly followed suit. Ignoring their accusatory tone, the president questioned me about the abrupt halt in transactions after my departure. I took a deep breath and explained, "Our clients don't need us to manage their taxes. There are tax accountant firms that offer cheaper services. They continue with us because of me." Tom snapped back, questioning my self-worth, and Emily taunted me, both challenging my value to the company. Undeterred, I elaborated on my unique approach, offering tailored tax-saving strategies that resonated with our clients. Tom dismissed it as inefficient, arguing that their manual-based operations were more practical. The president sighed deeply, recognizing the fundamental difference in our approaches. In a serious tone, he said, "Actually," signaling a crucial revelation or decision to follow. I received a surprising call from my father, the former president. It turns out that some clients, who had stopped transactions, went directly to Dad to negotiate on my behalf. I hadn't anticipated clients going to such lengths for me. Dad emphasized that the tax department thrived because of my contributions. Not only did I manage my clients efficiently, but I also supported my colleagues' clients, possessing knowledge that even Tom couldn't match. Dad disclosed that if I hadn't declined the promotion, I would have held a higher position than a department head by now. The current president expressed regret with a pained expression. Emily appeared shocked, probably grappling with the idea that I could have been her superior. The president apologized for making me resign initially and asked if I would consider revoking my resignation. According to Dad, I was indispensable to the company. While I appreciated the change in the president's perspective, I hesitated to accept. Tom interrupted our conversation, visibly upset, and protested the president's decision, questioning why I was chosen over him. Emily echoed his sentiments, praising Tom's leadership and expressing disbelief at the preference for me. The president then sternly addressed them, revealing that since my resignation, numerous complaints had been received from the tax department, suggesting they had been shifting their workload onto others. Tom's face turned pale as the president exposed the fact that he had been pushing the preparation of client declaration forms onto subordinates, including Emily's work for multiple clients. The president pointed out the irony, considering Tom had accused me of being a salary thief. Observing Tom and Emily's pale expressions, the president continued by revealing an alleged leak about their romantic involvement. Tom struggled to defend himself, claiming he was merely mentoring Emily as her superior. However, the president produced receipts from the accounting department, indicating dining expenses filed by Tom. Confronted with evidence, Tom, sweating profusely, was unable to provide a convincing explanation. Emily, too, turned ghostly pale as the president accused them of neglecting their duties, inflating expense claims, and violating company policy by having an affair in the office while being married. In a calm and straightforward manner, the president declared the termination of their employment effective immediately. Tom and Emily tried to resist, promising to retract the receipt claims and pleading for their jobs. "I have a family," Tom desperately pleaded, attempting to reverse his termination. Emily echoed his sentiments, tearfully expressing her fear of being fired. She promised to apologize to me and others for burdening them with work, realizing the gravity of the situation involving neglect of duties and an affair with a supervisor. Concerned about her reputation, she implored for a second chance. Sensing their desperation, I offered advice. "Why don't you stop resisting? It's undignified," I suggested. Tom glared at me, retorting, "Shut up. What would a single person like you understand?" I sighed, reminding him, "Tom, you were the one who got me fired. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Why don't you take some responsibility and reflect a bit?" Frustrated, Tom looked away, while Emily bit her lip in distress. Aware of more details about their misconduct, I turned to the president, asking with a smile if I should share them. Tom and Emily frantically tried to stop me, fearing further exposure. I issued an ultimatum, warning them that wrongdoings would eventually come to light, urging them to face reality before it worsened. At my words, both Tom and Emily collapsed to their knees, and the president decided to fire them on the spot. Later, I revealed more about their misdeeds, including Tom faking business trips to spend days with Emily and their insidious tactics of harassing disliked employees into quitting. Despite my attempts to help those employees, Tom and Emily's strategies were relentless. They repeatedly reprimanded and pressured employees out of my sight, often assigning sudden tasks with tight deadlines. The resigned employees had initially asked me to keep quiet, but since they were now happily working elsewhere, I decided it was time to speak up. The president, furious at my revelations, expressed anger about cutting Tom and Emily's final salary. He planned to thoroughly investigate past inflated expense claims. Tom, with tears in his eyes, begged the president not to cut his salary, fearing the impact on his family. As the truth unraveled, Tom's affair with Emily came to light, leading to Tom's divorce. The two now face claims for compensation in the divorce lawsuit, marking the consequential aftermath of their actions. I became aware of the situation when Tom reached out to me, seeking assistance in persuading the president to reconsider their firing. Emily and Tom found themselves in dire straits. Despite their efforts, they struggled to secure new jobs in the tax industry. The industry's close-knit nature meant that word of their misdeeds spread rapidly, making potential employers hesitant to hire them. Desperate for income to cover divorce compensation and living expenses, they resorted to day labor at construction sites, a stark departure from their previous office roles. Emily would often call me in tears, pleading for help. "Lily, please help. I only wanted a better life, and I never truly liked Tom," she'd cry. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that their predicament was a consequence of their own actions. Many, including myself, had been impacted by their behavior. I reminded Emily that the consequences were a result of her choices. "You can't unring a bell," I told her firmly. Facing hardships was the consequence of her decisions. Emily's despair echoed through her protests. Despite her regrets, the outcome remained unchanged. As for me, I chose to distance myself from the chaos of the corporate world. Despite the president's pleas for my return, I declined. Once told to resign, I had no desire to return. Instead, I found solace in assisting at a friend's tax office, supplementing my income and enjoying a more relaxed lifestyle. In the future, I entertained the idea of starting my own office, where I could serve my clients without the constraints of corporate bureaucracy. In my own space, I could fully dedicate myself to my clients' needs. As a tax accountant, I aspired to be on equal footing with my clients, providing service without superiority. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with excitement and opportunities to pursue what truly mattered to me. My second life had just begun, and I eagerly anticipated the journey ahead.
It's like a dream come true. We got a huge $300 million inheritance in our very own company. When the workers saw my sister-in-law, Mary, celebrating our dad's inheritance, they started whispering to each other. They were super happy, and Mary proudly said, "Shay, keep it down. This is the moment when my husband gets to take over the company and get $3 million. After hearing that, one of the workers burst out laughing. My older brother, sitting next to his confused wife, was reading a will from a lawyer. His face went pale as he read it. "Look at this," my brother said, showing her the will. She screamed. "I'm Lucy, 29 years old, and I work for my dad's business. When he was young, my dad had the smart idea to start a business from scratch. Over time, it grew into a decent-sized company with lots of workers. But right after starting the business, he got into debt. Even as a little kid, I could see how tough it was for my dad. Even when the company got bigger, I still wanted to help my mom with her clerical work in the office. My parents told me I could go to college and choose any career I wanted, but I really wanted to work for my dad's company. That's all I could think about when I finished high school. When I joined my dad's company, Bob, who had been working there for a long time, was the first person to teach me about business. He didn't treat me differently just because I was the boss's daughter. Thanks to Bob, I got to learn a lot about how the company works. My brother Tom, who's only 2 years older than me, went to college to learn about management. He was always proud to tell people that our dad ran a business and that he would take over one day. Tom's friends would ask him, "What are your plans after college, Tom? Are you going to find a job?" Tom would say, "I don't need to find a job because I'll be working for my dad's company. I'll become the president eventually, so I'm taking my time to learn about management until then." "Wow, you're going to be the next president. That sounds like a really stable future. I'm kinda jealous," one of Tom's friends said. "Tom, you have a younger sister too, right? Won't there be a competition over who gets to take over the company?" Another friend asked. "Yeah, I have a younger sister, but she's just finished high school and she's pretty down to earth," Tom replied. "You always say that, but I've heard she's actually doing some important work behind the scenes at the company. If I become president, I'll make sure to keep her on board as long as she listens to me," Tom assured. My brother was spending a lot of money and having fun, pretending it was all part of learning to be a business manager. He knew that if he acted well, he'd have lots of friends around him, and being the next president of the company made him popular with women who wanted to date him. He ended up marrying Mary, who was very flashy and attractive. They had a fancy wedding, went on a luxurious honeymoon overseas, built a big mansion, and started their life together. He said he did all this to look good as the future president of the company. Mary seemed happy with Tham. He listened to her and let her enjoy all the fancy things in life. I doubt she'd want a life like mine, where I work with my mom behind the scenes in my dad's company, I told someone. Lucy, you don't seem like the CEO's daughter. You don't act like you're the president's daughter, she said. Mary would often laugh at me when we saw each other at family events. I prefer a simpler life, I said. She looked at me like she felt sorry for me. I pity you for being the president's daughter but not knowing how to spend money. You still live with your parents and have plenty of money, so you don't need to work hard. And with your title, shouldn't men be drawn to you? My brother chimed in, yeah, she's right. Lucy's always been so humble, people wouldn't even guess her dad's the president. She treats everyone like equals. It's surprising. I still have a lot to learn in my job. Many of my colleagues are better than me, so I can't act like I'm the boss, I argued. But my brother looked shocked. That's why you're not useful. A boss needs to stand out so they're respected by their team. Let others handle the simple tasks. It seems like only Dad and I are the bosses around here. You shouldn't belittle your team, no matter how powerful you are. Before I could reply, my brother interrupted me, looking annoyed. A woman who's too logical isn't attractive to men. Then Mary joined in. If you keep talking like that, you'll never find a husband. You should try to be more appealing, don't you think, Tham? Yeah, well, when I become president, I might just fire a humble employee like you, Tham said. After that, my brother and Mary said their piece and left quickly. My mom, who had stayed quiet during all of this, comforted me after they left. She said, "You're doing great work for the company, which really helps me and your dad. Don't let what Tham says bother you." My dad nodded, looking serious. They had already told my brother to his face that they didn't like his ideas. But after that, my brother and Mary got upset and didn't come to our house for over a month. I remembered how gloomy it was during that time, so I told my parents, Tham and Mary can say whatever they want. After that, Tham and Mary kept living their lives however they wanted, going to fancy restaurants and luxury resorts. It was all to make it seem like Tham would be the president of my dad's company one day. My dad was working really hard to grow his business, but one night at home, he started complaining of chest pain. "Dad, are you okay? Just try to stay calm." "I'll call for an ambulance," I said. "Lucy, grab this." As we waited for the ambulance, my dad motioned to a drawer and told me he had a letter for me. I hurriedly grabbed the letter from the drawer. "I want you to read this if anything happens to me. Everything else is up to the lawyers," he said breathlessly before losing consciousness before the ambulance arrived. Despite being rushed to the emergency room, he died without regaining consciousness. My brother and Mary were away on a trip when my father passed away, so they couldn't be there for him. They returned from their trip 2 days later. At the end of my father's funeral, Tham said, "We're just glad we arrived on time. I never imagined my father would pass away while we were on vacation." I was shocked. My brother and Mary showed up at the funeral without any worries, not acknowledging that my mother and I had been left to handle everything. I talked to my brother about it in private, so the other employees wouldn't hear. "Couldn't you have come back home sooner?" I asked my brother in private. "What? I couldn't. Our return flight was already booked," my brother replied without offering an apology, then turned to address the employees. "Thank you all for your support. From now on, I'll be stepping into my father's shoes with dignity," he said. Mary glanced around at the employees, who had gone silent at my brother's words, and praised him, saying, "That's exactly what Tham would do." Everyone's impressed, right? It's only natural, considering my husband's dignity. With pride, my brother said to me, "Lucy, isn't the ceremony about to begin? Please lead the way." I was annoyed by my brother's tardiness and his arrogance, but I led him and the employees to the meal ceremony table. My brother continued to act arrogantly as we ate. "Lucy, isn't the quality of this food questionable? It might lower our father's reputation as president," he remarked. "Mom and I already discussed it and agreed on the menu. Plus, I don't need you telling me what to do. This is why people don't understand what it means to be president," I snapped back. He not only bossed me around but also gave orders to the other employees serving the guests. "You're useless," he declared. I hurried to intervene when I heard my brother ordering Bob, a longtime employee, around. "Tham, that's not right. Don't talk down to Bob or any of our employees." They deserve respect. Why should I act humble in front of someone who's just an employee? They should show me more respect as the president, he argued. Mary joined in, backing him up. That's correct. Lucy, stop disrespecting Tom, the president of the company. If you keep disobeying him, he can fire you. He's in charge, she warned. Just as my brother and his wife were getting worked up, a man showed up. Sorry to interrupt. Your father asked me to handle his inheritance, he revealed. He was the lawyer my father had hired while he was still alive. Then it hit me. My father had mentioned before he passed away that he had already hired a lawyer. It seemed he had been preparing for his death and had spoken with a lawyer a few years back. My brother and Mary's faces lit up when the lawyer mentioned inheritance. They eagerly welcomed him into their room. Tom said, "Thank you for coming. Let's get this done as soon as possible." But as he spoke with the lawyer, Tom started to cry. Wasn't my father's inheritance supposed to be $300 million? Mary, upon hearing this, couldn't contain her excitement. $300 million. That much money for our company is like a dream come true. The employees started whispering when they heard this. Mary proudly announced to the grieving employees, "Quiet down. This is the moment when the company and its $300 million inheritance passed to Tom." Upon hearing this, one of the employees burst into uncontrollable laughter. My brother had the will and was reading it next to Mary, who was puzzled by the employee's reaction. My brother's face went pale as he read. Mary, according to the will, the entire company will be inherited by the eldest daughter, Lucy," he stammered. He stared at the will for a moment, then erupted. "This can't be. It's wrong." The lawyer, sounding troubled, confirmed, "This is a legally binding will." My brother's voice grew more strained. "What? I can't believe this. How can Lucy become president instead of me?" "Maybe Dad was just getting old and forgetful," Mary chimed in. "Yeah, your father wasn't thinking straight. A will made by someone losing their mind is worthless." Hearing this, I lost it. I couldn't stand by while they insulted my late father. I couldn't let anyone, even family, disrespect my father, who was a good man till the end. "Stop. The idea of my brother Tom becoming president is even more absurd, in my opinion," I asserted. My brother was furious. "What are you trying to say? That I'm not fit to be president?" he snapped back. Without hesitation, I fired back, "You're absolutely right. How can you lead this company if you've never contributed to it?" "Don't be ridiculous. Mary and I even built a mansion fit for a president, and we made sure to project the image," he defended. "Building a mansion unsuited for a leader and dining extravagantly? That's not good for business. And didn't Dad cover most of the costs for that house and extravagance? How would you even know?" I countered. "Just before he passed, Dad left me a letter. In it, he outlined all the money he had spent on you and said he would give you a gift during his lifetime. So your share of the estate is practically nothing," I disclosed. Mary panicked. "Hold on. Is the inheritance really worth $300 million? Have we already spent that much? It's not fair that we're left with so little." The employee who had been laughing earlier quickly approached Mary and explained that $300 million is from the company's assets, not personal wealth. "I'm sure all the employees here understand that. Company funds aren't meant for inheritance," I clarified to Mary. "Exactly. The company's money isn't meant to be divided among family members, so I doubt my brother's share is significant," I added. "That's heartbreaking," Mary sighed. "Oh no, Lucy." Mary was shocked. "The inheritance? $300 million? My brother suddenly stood up as if he'd had a revelation and shouted at the employees, "Do you really want a plain woman like Lucy as your company president? You must see that I'm more qualified. I have the same charm as my father." None of his colleagues sided with him. Bob took the lead and spoke to my brother. "Your father, the one you're succeeding, was a charismatic founder of this company, but you and he are different. What you have is arrogance, not charisma." My brother flew into a rage when Bob calmly countered him. "Tom, you may hold a position in our company, but us, the employees, hardly ever see you around. I don't have time for actual work in the company. I'm too busy networking with others. There's no time for menial tasks," my brother argued. "Networking? Going on trips and partying all night? Is that what you call networking? That's hardly enough." Bob continued, "Meanwhile, Lucy's been putting in hard work every day. learning about the company while quietly handling her behind-the-scenes duties. I see the same dedication in her as I did in your father. Lucy is the right person for the job as far as all of us here at the company are concerned, Bob concluded. The other employees nodded in agreement. I was touched and responded, "Thank you all so much." Honestly, I'm taken aback by this news, but having seen my father's passion for the company firsthand, I share the same dedication. I'm grateful for your continued support. The employees warmly applauded as I bowed deeply. Emboldened by their applause, I spoke firmly. Each one of you here is a valuable friend who has contributed to our business. Anyone who overlooks that isn't fit to be part of this company, let alone its president. Even the president can be fired by the employees. My brother grew annoyed upon hearing this. What are you talking about? I'm your brother. What are you even talking about? You were the one who said you'd fire me if you became president, brother. I reminded him. I can't keep paying a salary to an incompetent employee just because he's family. This is ridiculous. Can someone please help me out here? My brother pleaded for support from those around him, but all he got were cold stares from the employees. Seeing that nobody was backing him up, my brother and Mary left in a hurry. After that, Tom lost his job and relied on the small inheritance he received. But it didn't last long. "Can you lend me some money, Lucy?" he asked, kneeling before me. I was disgusted by my brother's behavior. Even after losing his job, he didn't try to find a new one and was still expecting help from the family. I firmly told my mother not to give him any money. His friends, who had once been supportive, turned their backs on him when they found out he lost his presidency to me, his sister. When Mary married my brother, she had envisioned being the wife of the company president, but none of her friends showed any sympathy for her. As their financial situation became dire, my brother and his wife decided to sell their mansion. The proceeds from the sale could have sustained their lifestyle, but without any income, their savings quickly dwindled. When they had nothing left to sell, they struggled to cover their expenses. Eventually, they realized they needed to find work. However, no one was willing to hire them because they lacked any work experience. Eventually, Tom found a part-time job at a convenience store. Now, he's in an unfamiliar role, facing criticism from younger coworkers. Mary's situation changed too. She's no longer a full-time housewife but now works as a cashier at a supermarket, alongside the very part-time housewives she once looked down upon. Her salary is low. Meanwhile, I'm using my experience from behind-the-scenes work to help the company grow. With support from Bob and other employees, the company is thriving. Ironically, my brother's situation has strengthened employee unity. I've pledged to keep working with my mother to expand the business, aiming to bring pride to my Father in heaven. The crystal glasses clinked against fine china as Sarah Thompson, my sister, hosted another one of her elite family dinners. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching my brother-in-law Marcus, the self-proclaimed business genius, hold court with his usual audience of admirers. At 42, he wore his CEO status like a crown, each word dripping with the kind of confidence that only came from never having faced real failure. "And that's how I closed the Anderson merger," he concluded, basking in the appreciative murmurs from our gathered family. "Biggest deal of the quarter. Some people just understand business at a different level." His eyes flickered to me, lips curling into what my sister probably thought was a charming smile. I took another sip of wine, already knowing what was coming. These monthly family dinners had become Marcus's favorite stage for his particular brand of subtle cruelty. Speaking of business, he turned fully towards me now. "Claire, how's that little, what do you call it, consulting thing of yours?" "It's going well," I replied evenly, noting how my sister Sarah straightened in her chair, eager for the show to begin. At 38, I learned that the best defense against Marcus's barbs was calm dignity. "Still working from home, right?" He chuckled, swirling his expensive bourbon. When Sarah told me her sister was in business too, I expected something more professional. How can anyone take you seriously without even a proper office? My mother shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Dad suddenly found his roasted vegetables fascinating. They'd long ago chosen their side in the family dynamic, and it wasn't mine. My client seemed satisfied, I said, spearing a piece of perfectly cooked salmon. Marcus had insisted on catering from the city's most expensive restaurant, another chance to display his wealth. Clients? Marcus barked out a laugh. Is that what we're calling the local coffee shops and boutiques now? You know, Claire, if you ever want real business advice. Actually, a deep voice cut through the dining room. Our client list is quite impressive. All heads turned to Richard Anderson. Yes, that Anderson, of the merger Marcus had just been bragging about. He'd been quietly observing from the other end of the table, where Marcus had seated him as the guest of honor. In fact, Anderson continued, setting down his fork, my daughter's company has been trying to get on her waiting list for months. Claire's firm is rather selective about who they take on. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. I could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath, see Marcus's face transition from confidence to confusion. Your daughter's company, Marcus managed, his voice suddenly less certain. Megan Anderson, CEO of Horizon Tech. Richard smiled warmly in my direction. Claire's firm handled the Matthews Group acquisition last year. Brilliant strategy, by the way. When Megan told me who was behind it, I could hardly believe someone so young had orchestrated such a complex deal. But then, real talent doesn't need corner offices to prove itself, does it? I watched the color drain from Marcus's face as realization dawned. The Matthews acquisition had been the talk of the business world, a $400 million deal that had transformed the tech landscape, and I'd orchestrated it from my home office, the one he'd been mocking moments before. I had no idea, Marcus stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating. Obviously, I replied softly, allowing myself a small smile. More wine, anyone? Sarah's hand shook as she gripped her glass, her perfect hostess composure cracking. Our mother's mouth had fallen open slightly, and Dad was now staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Claire, Marcus started, his tone shifting to something almost ingratiating. Why did you ever mention that I handle major corporate acquisitions, that my little consulting thing advises Fortune 500 companies? I set down my wine glass carefully. You never asked, Marcus. You were too busy telling everyone how successful you are. Richard Anderson chuckled. And speaking of success, Claire, I hope you'll consider taking Horizon Tech on as a client. Megan's been quite persistent about wanting to work with you. Of course, Marcus jumped in. Anything for family. I'm sure Claire would be happy to. I'm afraid my schedule is quite full, I interrupted smoothly. But Mr. Anderson, please tell Megan to have her team send over the proposal. I'll review it personally. Marcus's face flushed red. The Anderson merger he'd been bragging about minutes ago, his biggest deal of the quarter, was worth less than half of what I handled for Matthews. And now his direct line to Richard Anderson was watching me with obvious respect while barely acknowledging Marcus's presence. Claire, Sarah found her voice, though it trembled slightly. Why didn't you tell us? All these years. Tell you what, Sarah. That while you and Marcus were mocking my little business, I was building one of the most respected consulting firms in the industry. That the home office you love to ridicule has closed deals worth billions? I dabbed my lips with the linen napkin. Would you have believed me? Or would you have just found new ways to diminish my success? The truth hung heavy in the air. They wouldn't have believed me. They'd been too invested in their narrative of Marcus as the family's business genius and me as the struggling younger sister who couldn't quite measure up. But your clothes. Sarah gestured weakly at my simple black dress. Your car, you live in that small house. Because I don't need to prove anything to anyone, I replied. Success speaks for itself. It doesn't need designer labels or luxury cars to be real. Richard Anderson nodded approvingly. That's precisely why your reputation in the industry is so sterling, Claire. No flash, all substance. The exact opposite of. His eyes flickered to Marcus briefly. Certain other approaches. Marcus's hand tightened around his bourbon glass. His carefully cultivated image of business brilliance was crumbling, and with it his standing in the family. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Mr. Anderson, I turned to Richard, ignoring Marcus's attempts to catch my eye. I'd love to hear more about Horizon Tech's expansion plans. Perhaps over dinner next week. I know a wonderful little place. The new French restaurant on 5th. Marcus interjected desperately. I'm a member there. I cold. Actually, I smiled. I own it. One of my small side investments. Nothing like running a major corporation, of course, but it turns a nice profit. The restaurant Marcus had been trying to get a membership to for months. The one he bragged about finally getting into. He'd never known that every time he dined there, he'd been in my establishment. Sarah's wine glass slipped from her fingers, staining the pristine tablecloth red. But for once she didn't rush to clean it up. She was too busy staring at me, really seeing me for the first time in years. The thing about success, I continued, standing up from the table, is that it doesn't need an audience to be real. While you were all focused on Marcus's latest promotion or Sarah's country club membership, I was building something lasting, something real. I reached for my simple leather handbag, not designer, but handmade by an artisan I'd helped start their business. Thank you for dinner, Sarah. Mr. Anderson, I'll have my office contact you about that dinner next week. As I walked toward the door, I heard Marcus's strained voice. Claire, wait, perhaps we should discuss. Discuss what? I turned back briefly. How you spent years mocking my business? How you treated me like a failure because I didn't brag about my success? Or maybe how you're suddenly interested in my little consulting thing now that you know who my clients are. The silence was deafening. Sarah had sunk back in her chair, her perfect dinner party in ruins. Our parents were looking anywhere but at me. And Marcus looked like a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble. Send me the dinner bill, Sarah, I called over my shoulder. I know how Marcus hates to spend money on family charity cases. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, leaving them to digest not just their expensive catered meal, but the realization that they'd spent years underestimating exactly the wrong person. And this was just the beginning, because what they didn't know, what Marcus was about to find out, was that his company's upcoming merger, the one he'd been counting on to secure his position as CEO, was about to face an unexpected complication. One that had everything to do with the sister-in-law he dismissed for so long. The morning after the dinner party, my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages from Sarah, voicemails from Marcus, even emails from my parents, all suddenly desperate to clear up any misunderstandings. I smiled, remembering Marcus's face when Richard Anderson had revealed who I really was. But I wasn't interested in their belated attempts at reconciliation. I had a merger to stop. You see, what Marcus didn't know, what he'd been too arrogant to investigate, was that his company's upcoming merger wasn't just another deal. It was a carefully orchestrated plan, one I'd been developing for months. Claire, my assistant's voice came through the intercom of my home office. Yes, the same one Marcus had mocked. Mr. Anderson is on line 1. I picked up the phone, settling into my ergonomic chair. My little home office might not have impressed Marcus, but its technology rivaled any corporate headquarters. Richard, good morning. Claire, his warm voice filled the line. I must say, dinner last night was enlightening. Your brother-in-law seems to be having quite the morning. He's been trying to reach me since dawn. I could imagine. Marcus's entire career hinged on this merger, the one he thought would cement his position as CEO. The one he'd been bragging about at every family gathering for months. Has he figured it out yet? I asked, pulling up the merger documents on my triple monitors. Not yet, Richard chuckled, though he might want to take a closer look at who's been quietly buying shares in his company over the past 6 months. Ah yes, the investment firm that had been accumulating a significant stake in Marcus's company. The one operating through a series of shell companies. The one that through a complex web of corporations belonged to me. Claire. Sarah's name flashed on my phone again. I declined the call. Your sister seems persistent, Richard observed. They all are, now that they know. I signed off on another document, watching as my ownership percentage ticked up another fraction. Amazing how success changes people's perspective. The next few days were a symphony of panic from Marcus's corner. He finally started digging into the merger details, probably hoping to impress me with his business acumen. Instead, he discovered something terrifying. His company was being systematically purchased by an unknown entity. You have to help me. He cornered me outside my favorite coffee shop, not coincidentally, one of my first consulting clients. Claire, whatever bad blood there is between us, this is my career we're talking about. I took a sip of my artisanal latte. Funny, I thought it was just a little coffee shop last month when you mocked me for helping them expand. I was wrong, okay. He ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up in a way Sarah would have hated. I was arrogant and stupid, but please, if this merger falls through, then what, Marcus? You'll have to work your way up like everyone else. Start something from scratch. Build a business without writing on your family name. His face paled. We both knew he'd never built anything himself. His CEO position had come through connections, not competence. The same connections he used to belittle me at every opportunity. My phone buzzed again. A notification from my legal team. Another block of shares acquired. We were getting close. The board meeting is next week, Marcus said desperately. They're expecting me to present the merger details. But this unknown buyer, if they gain controlling interest, then you'd be answerable to them. I finished for him. Imagine that. The great Marcus Thompson having to justify his business decisions to someone else. The realization dawned in his eyes slowly. Claire, the buyer, it's not. My phone buzzed again. A text from Richard Anderson. Megan's team just sent over the Horizon Tech proposal. Impressive plans. Shame about Marcus's company. They would have made a good partner if their leadership was different. I showed Marcus the text, watched as the last pieces clicked into place. You're going to destroy everything I've built, he whispered. No, Marcus. I'm going to show you what real business looks like. I stood up, smoothing my simple but immaculately tailored dress. The board meeting is at 2 p.m. next Thursday, correct? Don't worry about preparing anything. I'll be handling the presentation. The week that followed was chaos. Sarah showed up at my house twice, begging me to reconsider. He's family, she pleaded, as if she hadn't spent years treating me like an embarrassment. My parents tried next. Think about what this will do to the family name. Dad argued. The same family name that hadn't stopped them from laughing at Marcus's jokes about my cute little business. But the real satisfaction came at the board meeting. I walked into the room Marcus had dominated for so long, taking my seat at the head of the table. The other board members, old men who'd never questioned Marcus's leadership, stared in confusion. Gentlemen, I began, as Marcus slumped in his chair. I represent Quantum Ventures, the investment firm that now holds a controlling interest in this company. We've reviewed the proposed merger extensively, and we have some concerns about the current leadership strategy. For the next hour, I methodically laid out every mistake Marcus had made, every rushed decision, every missed opportunity, every instance where he chosen flash over substance. The board members' expressions shifted from confusion to concern to outright alarm. Therefore, I concluded, our first act as majority shareholder will be to recommend new leadership. Someone who understands that real business success isn't about corner offices or country club memberships. It's about solid strategy, careful planning, and actual results. Marcus stood up, his face red. You can't do this. I built this company. Did you? I pulled out a folder. Because our analysis shows that company value has actually decreased under your leadership. The only thing keeping your position secure was this merger, a merger that as of this morning is no longer happening. The board erupted in chaos. Marcus tried to speak, but his voice was drowned out by angry shareholders demanding explanations. I sat quietly, watching years of his carefully constructed facade crumble. Oh, and Marcus, I added as he headed for the door, his career in shambles. You might want to start looking for a new country club membership. The one you have is about to be discontinued. The aftermath was everything I'd planned for. Marcus was forced to resign, his reputation in tatters. Sarah's social circle, the one she used to mock my simple lifestyle, suddenly discovered that the sister they dismissed was now controlling one of the city's largest companies. My parents called a family meeting, probably hoping to salvage something from the wreckage. I attended out of curiosity. You've made your point, Mom said, her voice trembling. Surely we can fix this as a family. I looked around the table. Marcus, without his designer suit and corporate swagger. Sarah, her perfect image tarnished by association. My parents, finally forced to acknowledge that their golden couple wasn't so golden after all. Fix what? I asked calmly. I simply did business. Isn't that what Marcus always wanted? For me to understand real business. But it's destroyed him, Sarah protested. His career, his reputation. No, I corrected her. His arrogance destroyed him. his need to diminish others to feel important. I just showed everyone what was already there. I stood up, gathering my things. The company will do better under new leadership. The shareholders will be happier, and Marcus, well, I hear there's good money in running a home-based business. If you can handle working without a proper office, that is. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 5 years later, the company had doubled in value under new leadership. I'd merged it with Horizon Tech, creating one of the largest tech consultancies in the country. Marcus had tried starting his own firm, but without his corporate title and family connections, he discovered that business success required more than a corner office and an expensive suit. Sarah still hosted family dinners, though they were considerably less grand now. Sometimes, when I attended, I'd catch Marcus staring at my simple clothes and modest lifestyle with new understanding. He finally learned what I'd known all along: real success doesn't need to announce itself. The small home office where I'd built my empire remained unchanged, but now, on its wall, hung a framed photo from that last board meeting. Marcus's face, as he realized that the sister-in-law he dismissed had orchestrated his downfall, was a masterpiece of karmic justice. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't just success. It's success they never saw coming. As for me, I still prefer working from home, still drive my reliable car, still live in my comfortable but modest house. But now, when Marcus passes me in his much-reduced circumstances, he understands a fundamental truth. True power isn't in what you show, it's in what you know. And I'd known, all along, exactly what I was building.
Helen reclined in the hallway, her eyes aglow as they fixated on the concert tickets clutched tightly in her grasp. Just as Christina emerged from the office, Helen burst out, "Christina, guess what? We're finally going to see them perform live." Christina paused at the entrance, her face shaded with concern. "Helen, I have some bad news. I can't go," Christina confessed, dodging Helen's questioning gaze. "I have something important to do." A mischievous suspicion flickered in Helen. "Oh, is it a mysterious date you haven't mentioned?" Christina chuckled softly. "No, it's not a date," she said, growing more serious. Helen persisted. "So, what's the reason?" "We've been looking forward to this." Christina shifted uncomfortably. "Please, let's just leave it at that." However, Helen's curiosity was insatiable. When Christina stepped away to get some water, Helen noticed a medical prescription on the coffee table. Unable to resist, she glanced over the paper. "Mrs. Emily Foster," she whispered. Emily was Christina's ex-husband's mother. Upon Christina's return, Helen questioned her. "Why are you still helping your ex-husband's mother, Christina? You've been divorced for a long time. Why keep her in your life?" Christina remained silent for a moment. With a gentle smile, she replied, "Emily's always been good to me. Right now, she needs someone, and that someone is me." Helen sighed. "I just think you deserve better. You're so caring, and you're still alone. You deserve happiness." Christina softly replied, "Caring for Emily brings me a different kind of happiness, Helen." Helen and Christina's friendship seemed genuine on the surface, but it concealed a shadow of true companionship. Hidden beneath their interactions was a bond built on manipulation and selfish intentions. Christina, ever trusting, often overlooked Helen's actions, hoping for the best. However, deep inside, she sensed the uneven nature of their relationship. Whenever they ventured out together, Helen ensured she stood out, from her carefully selected outfits to her attention-grabbing comments and preferred places. It all seemed designed to outshine Christina and keep her in the background. The concert ticket incident was a prime example. Helen bragged about securing tickets to the hottest concert in town without considering Christina's musical preferences. Moreover, during social outings, Helen would make unsolicited comments about Christina's single status, introducing her to any single man present with a voice dripping with pity. as if Christina was a project needing intervention. Christina could see through it. Helen's attempts to play matchmaker were not out of concern for her, but rather to spotlight herself and lure more attention. Christina often felt like a mere accessory in Helen's social game. Christina, a gentle soul, found it hard to decline any invitation, even if it wasn't to her liking. She usually accompanied her friends on their escapades, not wanting to upset anyone. However, today was different. There was another commitment she couldn't ignore. As they approached the bridge, the point where their paths would diverge, Christina could sense Helen's concern. Gathering her thoughts, Christina paused and said, "Helen, I truly appreciate your concern for me. I believe that someday I'll find the right person. Please go on and enjoy yourself. I need to head in a different direction today." Christina inhaled deeply, the crisp cold air filling her lungs. Her thoughts quickly turned to Emily, her mother-in-law. On a normal day, Emily would have started the furnace by now. If she was having one of her painful episodes of migraines and high blood pressure, she'd be confined to her bed. This meant the house would be even colder, especially with the sharp winter chill outside. With a growing sense of urgency, Christina quickened her pace towards the bus stop. Their home was humble, a small house they acquired after her ex-husband lost their previous apartment due to his careless decisions. Glancing at her watch, she calculated that she had about 20 minutes before the bus would arrive. With the week's earnings clasped in her hand, she decided to drop by the pharmacy for some much-needed medication. "Christina, dear, how are things with you and Emily?" Margaret, the kind-hearted pharmacist who had been Emily's neighbor for years, greeted her warmly. "Hi, Margaret. Everything's much the same, no big changes," Christina replied with a small smile. "Dear Christina, Emily is truly fortunate to have you. Despite all that's happened, you've stayed by her side," Margaret remarked with a hint of admiration in her eyes. Christina responded softly, "Emily is like family to me." Margaret shook her hand with a mixture of disbelief and pity. "I'll never understand how a woman as good-hearted as Emily could have raised such a son." Collecting the medications and expressing her gratitude, Christina left the pharmacy, her heart heavy with the weight of her thoughts. She had always been a firm believer in serendipity. The day she bumped into Stephen at a local coffee shop, their eyes locked, and it felt as though the universe had conspired for that very moment. The connection was palpable. It wasn't long before they began dating, and as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Christina found herself falling deeply in love with him. 6 whirlwind months later, as they watched the sunset from their favorite spot at the beach, Stephen, with a nervous smile and eyes filled with hope, proposed marriage. Christina, her heart racing, agreed instantly. However, she couldn't help but point out that she hadn't even met his parents yet. Understanding her concerns, Stephen took her to his mother's house the following weekend. Emily, Stephen's mother, greeted them with a warm smile and open arms. It was a surprise to Christina how quickly she bonded with her. They would chat for hours, share stories, and by the end of the day, it felt as though they had known each other for years. Emily held a special fondness for Christina, evident in the approving gaze she cast upon her, her eyes sparkling with warmth. A few weeks later, Christina received an unexpected call from Emily. The tone in Emily's voice was both eager and nervous as she invited Christina to visit her. Sensing something amiss when she arrived, Christina sat down over a pot of tea. Emily took a deep breath and shared a shocking revelation. Stephen had been married twice before. Christina listened intently, her mind swirling with a whirlwind of emotions. What stood out, however, was a concern in Emily's voice. "He's my son, and I love him," Emily began, "but I don't want to see your heart get broken." Christina was surprised and puzzled. It wasn't every day that a mother revealed such a personal detail about her son. Still, she thanked Emily for her candor, although taken aback. Their conversation concluded with an embrace, but as Christina stepped out, her mind was clouded with mixed emotions. In the subsequent days, introspection filled Christina's thoughts. She decided against confronting Stephen, holding on to the belief that everyone deserved redemption and past actions should remain in the past. After all, Stephen's daily gestures painted a picture of a man who was devoted, considerate, and genuinely loved her. Time flew, and soon they were exchanging vows with loved ones around them, including a teary-eyed Emily, as they embarked on their marital journey. Christina occasionally reflected on her heart-to-heart with Emily. It served as a reminder of the value of trust, open dialogue, and the realization that everyone carries a past. Christina often thought back to that pivotal moment. Their quaint home stood as a reminder of what once was. Stephen, with his lofty ambitions, had convinced her to sell their apartment and invest the money in a seemingly promising business idea. Worse yet, he had persuaded his unsuspecting mother, Emily, to do the same. As the days unfolded, Stephen came clean about the grim reality. Not only had he lost every penny from their apartment sales, but he had also dug them deep into debt. Both Emily and Christina felt the weight of the betrayal, overwhelmed not just with shattered trust, but also relentless and intimidating phone calls from debtors. In her heart, Christina wanted to believe they were just facing the growing pains any young family might experience. She clung to the hope that they'd find a way out, and things would eventually get better. Yet, a more ominous cloud loomed, adding another layer of worry to an already strained household. Within the first year of their marriage, the pressure of not conceiving started to create cracks in their bond. Christina and Stephen had envisioned a life where they'd raise children together. Christina tried to stay positive and understanding, but Stephen's patience wore thin. His reluctance to consult a doctor was driven by a mix of fear and old-fashioned notions equating manhood with the ability to father children. One chilly evening, following yet another quiet meal, Stephen's bottled-up emotions erupted. "Perhaps you're the reason we can't start a family," he spat out. Christina was stunned and hurt by the baseless allegation, especially since they hadn't even taken a step towards seeking medical advice. The once harmonious atmosphere of their home was now punctuated by regular disputes. The warmth and intimacy that once characterized their relationship had evaporated, replaced by a cold detachment. The final straw came when Stephen, in a desperate move, revealed he was seeing another woman, hoping she would provide him with the family he yearned for. Christina's world fell apart. The love and trust she had placed in Stephen felt like a distant memory. Raised with traditional values, she had always believed in the enduring bond of marriage and the promise of forever. Stephen wasn't just her husband. He was her first and only love. Emily was beside herself with anger when she learned the truth. "How can you walk away from someone so genuine?" she demanded of Stephen. Over the years, Emily had come to see Christina as the daughter she never had. Her son's actions felt like a betrayal not just to Christina, but to her as well. Yet Stephen, blinded by his desires, just turned his back and left. He eventually married his new flame, and as days flowed into weeks and weeks into months, his new wife never made an effort to visit or connect with Emily. This sense of being abandoned by her son and ignored by his new wife left Emily grappling with immense loneliness and sorrow. Christina could see the pain and nostalgia in Emily's eyes. After a pause, Emily gestured for Christina to sit beside her and began to share a tale from her past. "Christina, when I was about your age, I was engaged to a kind man named Howard. I thought of him as the love of my life. I also had a close friend named Lucy, or so I believed. As the wedding preparations were in full swing, I learned that Howard had fallen for Lucy. To make matters worse, Lucy became pregnant with his child. The betrayal was overwhelming. The man I loved and my supposed best friend had turned my world upside down. Heartbroken, I watched as they moved away to start a new life together. However, a couple of years later, an unexpected call from Lucy left me in a state of distress. Lucy, who was Howard's ex-wife, confessed that Howard had left her. Struggling to find love again as a single mother, Lucy often turned to drink to drown her loneliness and regrets. While I pitied her situation, it was the thought of their young son that truly weighed on my heart. Lucy's health deteriorated rapidly, and realizing she had limited time, she asked me to care for her son, Stephen. The bond I developed with him was instant, even though he served as a constant reminder of my past heartache. I couldn't abandon him, especially after Lucy's passing. Her dying wish was for me to always be there for Stephen, and I willingly accepted, having grown genuinely fond of the boy. Christina listened, tears welling in her eyes, realizing the depth of Emily's compassion and the intricate ties that bound their shared history. "Christina, why are you so kind?" Emily asked, taken aback. "Oh, Emily," Christina whispered, understanding the parallels in their stories. Both had experienced heartbreaking betrayals from those they believed loved them the most. It was as if history had repeated itself, and they were bound together by shared pain. Christina was heartbroken, seeing how Stephen's neglect affected Emily, making her fall ill frequently. Eventually, Emily had a stroke. Many friends suggested that Christina move Emily to a specialized care center, arguing that Emily's condition might be beyond her capabilities. And after all, Emily wasn't truly her family. However, Emily and Christina saw each other differently. Christina saw them as family, and she was determined to care for Emily. Christina held onto the belief that with enough love and care, Emily would regain her strength and walk again, despite the doctor's doubts. Emily's determination never wavered. Christina gently inquired, "Did you never think of searching for Howard?" Emily took a moment, then sighed. "I loved Howard deeply, but I never searched for him. I thought, why should I? He probably had a family of his own by then." As Christina stepped off the bus and started her walk home, the sight of smoke billowing from her chimney brought a momentary sense of relief. It meant Emily had managed to light the stove. However, that relief was short-lived. An ambulance stood outside their house, frosted over, indicating it had been there for some time. Panic rolled up inside Christina as she quickened her steps, her mind filled with anxious thoughts. Rushing inside with her heart in her throat, she learned that Emily had suffered another stroke. When Emily finally regained consciousness, she felt a dull ache on her left side. Trying to speak, her words didn't come out clearly. Christina, with deep blue eyes full of warmth, reassured her. "Don't worry, Emily. You had another stroke, but you were strong enough to call for help. I'm here with you." Despite advice from her colleagues and friends, Christina left her job. Many couldn't understand why she would choose to care for the mother of a man who had once hurt her deeply. But for Christina, it wasn't just about that. She often thought about how she would feel if she were in Emily's position, facing loneliness and health challenges. She knew that if their roles were reversed, she would hope for someone to stand by her side, just as she was doing for Emily now. Christina's empathy and understanding went beyond past grievances. She wanted to be there for Emily, no matter what others thought. Over time, Emily began to regain her strength, and Christina became her rock during those challenging weeks. She cheered Emily on during her speech therapy sessions, held her hand as she took her first shaky steps, and laughed joyfully as they twirled around the living room in a makeshift dance. Upon returning to her job, Christina discovered a new management team in place, with Eddie as the new owner of the company. Eddie admired Christina's dedication to an elderly lady, not realizing the depth of their connection. Christina's commitment inspired him, and he found her intriguing. Helen, in contrast, was the buzzing bee of the office, known for her sociable tendencies and vibrant nature. One busy day, a critical project landed on their desk, and Eddie, as a team leader, delegated tasks. He handed the most demanding parts to Christina, trusting her proven track record. While Helen received a smaller yet important portion, Christina steadily worked through her tasks, occasionally checked in by Eddie, always met with a nod of assurance. In contrast, Helen found herself struggling, and her frequent coffee breaks and chats began to hamper her pace. As the deadline loomed closer, the office atmosphere grew tense. Eddie found a distraught Helen in the kitchen, and she admitted, "I've fallen behind." Eddie, concerned, approached her, asking, "Everything all right, Helen?" "I believe I could handle it," Eddie assured her, attempting to comfort Helen. "Don't worry, we'll work something out." At that moment, Christina entered the kitchen for a quick coffee refill. Observing Helen's distress, she offered, "I can chip in after I'm done with my part." This surprised both Helen and Eddie. When Christina handed in her portion of the project, Eddie was left amazed. Not only had she meticulously completed her assigned tasks, but she had also gone the extra mile, adding thoughtful recommendations that no one had even considered. On a particularly stressful day, Christina found a surprise at her desk, a vibrant bouquet of flowers. She paused, half expecting someone to realize they had mistakenly placed the flowers on her desk. Although the colorful blooms brightened her space, Christina couldn't help but wonder who had thought of her in such a kind way. Helen, always in the loop with office gossip, found herself taken aback by the unexpected turn of events. While she usually enjoyed being the go-to for office news, it was strange to see someone as reserved as Christina become the talk of the town. Christina, in the midst of solving the bouquet puzzle, discovered a dainty card nestled amidst the petals. It carried a sweet message in neat handwriting. "For the light you bring, even when you're not aware." However, there was no name or hint of the sender. Seen from the procurement department couldn't help but drop by grinning cheekily. "Looks like someone's smitten with you," he remarked, giving her a playful wink. Flustered, Christina replied, "I really can't figure out who sent them." Throughout the morning, Christina's desk became a hot topic. Speculations ran wild, jokes were cracked, and everyone seemed to have a theory about the mystery sender. Helen, trying to reclaim her role as the office storyteller, teased, "I bet it's from that handsome new guy in finance," gesturing towards a young man in a wheelchair. Soon, others joined in with their own humorous takes on Christina's secret admirer. By noon, the attention became too much for Christina. Though she loved the flowers, the constant buzz around them turned her quiet day topsy-turvy. Needing a breather, she decided to slip away for a quiet lunch outside. A few days later, Christina was engrossed in her work when a courier suddenly appeared at her desk, holding an extravagant basket of flowers. Christina, surprised, nodded as the courier handed her a slip to sign. Helen couldn't resist approaching to inspect the bouquet, a glint of envy in her eyes. Another surprise awaited Christina. Helen, always quick with remarks, asked, "What's the story this time?" Despite being younger and, in her own opinion, more attractive, Helen couldn't fathom why Christina was receiving such attention. Christina, slightly embarrassed, responded, "I honestly don't know. It could be a mix-up." Helen, not one to back down, insinuated, "I've never heard about any romantic interests in your life. Did you order these for yourself, maybe to pretend someone's interested?" Choosing not to engage with Helen's comments, Christina returned to her work, leaving the flowers as an unsolved mystery. Every day, like clockwork, a fresh bouquet appeared at Christina's desk. The office buzzed with whispers and chuckles, and Helen's attempts to tease Christina continued. Despite the office gossip, Christina remained silent about the mystery sender. The relentless flower deliveries were starting to affect her concentration at work, not because of the flowers themselves, but due to the incessant chatter around them. Christina needed to discover who was behind this and why, as the mystery had become an unwelcome distraction. Christina was about to head out for lunch when a man held the main door open for her. Surprised, she stopped, realizing he was wearing a chauffeur's cap and uniform. Before she could say anything, he escorted her to a sleek sit-in parked in front of the office building and opened the passenger door for her. Feeling like she was in a daze, Christina wondered if this was even real. She pinched herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Finally, she spoke up, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "Excuse me, sir, but what's going on? What does all this mean? Who's behind all this?" Her voice was tinged with bewilderment. The driver looked puzzled at first, but then broke into a warm smile. "You'll find out soon enough, madame. Please have a seat in the car." The whole situation felt like something out of a movie, and Christina was both anxious and excited to see what would happen next. The car smoothly made its way to one of the city's most elegant restaurants. The grand entrance was lit with soft lights, and as Christina stepped inside, the gentle hum of conversation greeted her. A smiling waiter instantly recognized her and motioned her to follow him as they weaved through tables. Christina spotted someone seated at a secluded spot in the back. His back was turned to her, making it impossible to recognize him immediately. With every step, her heartbeat quickened. Who could it be? Why were they meeting in such a secretive manner? Finally, she stood in front of the table, and before she could ask anything, the man turned around and greeted her. "Hello, Christina. Please join me." To her astonishment, it was Eddie, the new owner of the company. The soft glow of the table's candlelight highlighted his features, and he wore a gentle smile. Christina was filled with a mix of surprise, curiosity, and a dash of nervousness. When Eddie first learned of Christina's heartwarming actions towards her former mother-in-law, he found it hard to believe such acts of kindness were rare. Genuinely astonished, he decided to verify the story for himself by visiting Emily while Christina was away at work. Introducing himself as a colleague from her office, checking in to see if Christina's extended leave was for a genuine reason, Eddie realized that all he'd heard about Christina's dedication and kindness was true. Beyond his professional curiosity, Eddie had a personal reason for wanting to learn more about Christina. For years, he had remained single, and his mother often urged him to find someone special and settle down. Eddie would lament how many people seemed to prioritize material wealth over genuine feelings and connections. For him, it wasn't about physical appearance. He was drawn to a person's inner character and values. Knowing Christina's selfless actions towards Emily deepened his intrigue and respect for her. During their lunch, Christina chuckled, and Eddie looked slightly embarrassed. "I apologize if it was overwhelming. I just thought you deserved something beautiful every day." He hesitated before adding, "Honestly, I didn't know how to approach you directly. I've never really tried to win someone over before, so I guess I went a bit overboard with the flowers as a way to show my interest," Eddie admitted. Christina shook her head in amusement. "Well, thanks to your little gesture, there's a running joke in the office that I've been sending them to myself." Eddie laughed heartily, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I guess we've given them quite the story, haven't we?" During their lunch, Christina felt the need to be open about her past. Taking a deep breath, she said, "Before things progress further, there's something I need to share with you. I was married once before." Eddie looked at her with understanding eyes and a gentle smile. "I already know about it," he replied softly. "Your past is a part of you, but it doesn't define the present. We all have stories." This made her feel even more at ease, realizing that Eddie valued who she was now rather than dwelling on what once was. Eddie and Christina began spending more time together. It wasn't formal dating, but more of a slow exploration. Having navigated the rocky terrain of a failed marriage before, Christina was wary of diving in too quickly. They decided to keep their budding relationship under wraps for the time being. With Emily recovering well, Christina felt like she was living in a dream. Everything seemed to be falling into place. However, when Eddie mentioned promoting her, she immediately declined. She didn't want to be under the office microscope or the subject of speculation. "If you need assistance, I'm here to help, but please, let's keep it discreet," she told him. This response only deepened Eddie's admiration for her. He felt he had indeed found someone genuine to stand by his side. However, secrets have a way of unraveling. One day, a colleague spotted Eddie and Christina in an intimate moment outside of work. The rumor mill went into overdrive, and whispers of their relationship began circulating the office. When Helen caught wind of the gossip, she was livid. She cornered Christina, bombarding her with a barrage of questions. Christina, maintaining her composure, said nothing. This silence confirmed Helen's suspicions. Envy consumed her, and she hatched a plan to tarnish Christina's image. She started spreading fabricated tales of Christina's past, alleging that Christina's ex-husband had left her due to financial recklessness on her part. Helen's jealousy was no secret. She had tried multiple times to ensnare Eddie with her charms, but he remained impervious. Eddie would laugh off Helen's flirty remarks and dinner invites, always citing his busy schedule as a reason. One day, Helen stormed into Eddie's office, her face flushed with anger. "I can't believe you're seriously considering a relationship with Christina. Do you even know her past?" She stormed out, leaving Eddie calm. Armed with the truth that he had painstakingly gathered, he confronted Helen. "I'm aware that Christina was married," he replied, standing up and walking toward the window. "I also know why her husband left her. He left her for another woman." Eddie paused, his eyes locking onto Helen's as he turned back around. "And that woman, Helen, was you?" Helen was dumbfounded, her face a mix of shock and disbelief. She never thought her secret would be uncovered. But she had underestimated Eddie. Eddie was no novice when it came to due diligence. After speaking with Emily, he tracked down Christina's ex-husband, Stephen, and offered him a sum of money for the truth. The promise of quick cash loosened Stephen's lips, revealing the real story. The room went silent, the air heavy with the weight of the revealed secret. Helen's schemes had caught up to her, unraveling in the moment of stark revelation. Helen, once the chatterbox of the office, had retreated into the shadows. Christina always wanted to think the best of people, was concerned for her once close friend. When Helen suddenly stopped coming to work, Christina felt a pang of sadness. But when she asked Eddie about Helen's abrupt departure, he shared that she had decided to move and begin anew. Amidst all of this, Christina had a significant event coming up: meeting Eddie's mother, Grace. It was an important milestone for any couple. Since Christina's parents were no longer around, she brought Emily, her former mother-in-law, with her to dinner. Grace was elegant, her years of meticulous work as an accountant giving her a sharp, attentive gaze. From the moment Christina introduced Emily, the two clicked. Both had experienced so much in life, and as the evening progressed, they exchanged stories, laughed together, and found comfort in each other's company. It was clear to Eddie and Christina that a beautiful friendship was blossoming between Emily and Grace. As Christina became more involved in Eddie's business ventures, their professional collaboration turned heads in the office. Whispers turned into open discussions, and before long, everyone knew about their romance. The two had become the most talked about couple at the company, but this time for all the right reasons. At the office parking lot, a familiar car caught Christina's eye. The office was almost deserted, with everyone heading off to celebrate New Year's Eve with their families. As Christina was about to head home after wrapping up her final report, Eddie stepped out from behind the parked car, holding a huge bouquet of pristine white roses. "Come on, it's New Year's Eve. Work can wait," Eddie playfully chastised her, laughing. Christina replied, "I'm sorry, love. Just had that one last report to wrap up." That night, in the warmth of Eddie's home, they enjoyed an intimate dinner. During a quiet moment, Emily arose from her seat, her eyes shimmering with tears. She gazed deeply at Christina, emotion evident in her voice. "I might have lost Stephen, but in his place, I gained a precious daughter and a wonderful son." Fast forward 2 months, Eddie and Christina were happily married. In another 4 months, Christina decided to resign from her job. At Eddie's gentle insistence, the couple had even more joyous news. They were expecting a baby. Christina's story was a testament to the power of resilience and kindness. Despite life's challenges, she held onto the values her parents had taught her: to always lend a helping hand and to be kind. As they said, kindness would always come back to you, sometimes even tenfold.
I am Liz, and through a curious twist of fate, I find myself bound to the most remarkable man I've ever encountered. Alex, we're both 28, proud owners of our cozy abode, diligently covering our bills while crafting a life uniquely. A year has passed since we exchanged vows, and truth be told, life has been quite pleasant, except for a singular complication: Alex's parents. Now, don't get me wrong. I never anticipated playing the role of the knight in shining armor as the daughter-in-law. However, I certainly didn't envision becoming the family's unwelcome guest either. The inaugural encounter with my in-laws, felt akin to entering a lion's den with a stake strapped to my neck. Jane, my mother-in-law, possessed a knack for scrutinizing me, as though pondering whether I was more of an inconvenience or just plain dull. It was evident that she had formed her opinion about me before I could even utter a greeting. Alex had forewarned me about his mom's assertive personality on our way to their place that first time, advising me not to take it too personally. Despite my efforts at dinner while innocently passing the salt, Jane seized the opportunity to reminisce about Stephanie's culinary prowess, referring to me in the third person. Alex, seemingly uncomfortable, acknowledged her remarks without meeting my gaze, feeling like an invisible presence at the table. I swallowed my discomfort with a forced smile. When I tentatively acknowledged Stephanie's cooking skills, Jane's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She seemed to be measuring me against a ghost, and I confided in Alex about feeling scrutinized. He reassured me, holding me close and affirming that I was the one he chose. Little did I know that Jane had a more intricate plan in motion, and I was unwittingly cast as the pawn in her familial chess game. Living with a severe allergy is more than just inconvenient. It's akin to having a persistent shadow whispering danger in your ear. Since childhood, peanuts have been my formidable adversaries, leading to an emergency room visit after a mere spoonful of peanut paste. Consequently, my parents received a crystal-clear directive: shield her from peanuts and an array of other foods for her well-being: soy, peas, cherries, almonds, tomatoes, apricots, bananas, and even potatoes. It's a list that raises eyebrows among waiters and prompts hesitation from friends inviting me over for dinner. Jane, my mother-in-law, is well aware of this extensive list. Nevertheless, she manages to question the restrictions every time we dine at her place. Her tone, hovering between concern and disbelief, persistently suggests that maybe I can indulge just a bit, oblivious to the potential consequences. Once at a family gathering, Jane insisted on the safety of her casserole, only for Alex to discover a potentially hazardous ingredient. Though we gracefully excused ourselves, leaving the untouched casserole behind, the incident lingered as a small victory in an ongoing battle where Jane held all the cards. I've learned to navigate this allergen-laden world with caution, treating every meal outing as a strategic operation. Alex, with his supportive demeanor, accompanies me through this culinary minefield, constantly reassuring me that my cautiousness is justified. Yet, Jane's subtle jabs persist, extending beyond the dinner table. Her texts carry a warning tone, reminding me that not everyone takes my conditions seriously. It's more than a mere jab. It's a reminder of vulnerability, a realization that my allergy is perceived as a weakness to be exploited. Dinners at Jane's house are orchestrated affairs, resembling a play where everyone knows their lines except for the unwitting lead. I, the daughter-in-law, I was the unpredictable element, the wild card capable of unintentionally stirring up a commotion with a single bite. Alex did his best to ease the situation, but there's only so much you can do when you're playing on someone else's home turf. On a particular evening, the tension hung in the air as heavily as the gravy on the table. Jane was bustling around, placing dish after dish on the table. I sat there with my plate empty, anxiously waiting to discern what I could eat without risking a hospital visit. Alex, in his ever-supportive manner, passed the green beans, urging, "They're just divine." Jane's voice dripped with sweetness that failed to reach her eyes. Eyeing the beans, I sensed something was off. "What's in them?" I asked. "Oh, just a touch of almond slivers for crunch," Jane replied, waving a dismissive hand. Halting Alex's reach, I said, "I can't eat those. Almonds are a no-go for me, Jane." Feigning surprise, a hand to her chest, she responded, "Oh dear, I must have forgotten. Silly me." Alex stood up, his chair scraping back, his voice firm with frustration. "Mom, this is serious. Liz could end up in the hospital." Jane's eyes narrowed slightly and she retorted, "I just wanted to make something nice. It's not my fault Liz has all these allergies." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, forks pausing midair, and embarrassed glances exchanged. Mark, Alex's dad, attempted to diffuse the tension. "Let's just enjoy the meal, shall we? There's plenty Liz can eat." But the damage was done. The rest of the dinner passed in strained politeness, with Jane asking pointed questions about my allergies, as if she were jotting down notes for the next time. Later, when Alex and I were alone, he apologized. "I'm sorry, Liz. I should have double-checked everything before we came. Tired of feeling like a problem to be managed." I responded, "It's not your fault, but I'm starting to think your mom does these things on purpose." He didn't answer, and he didn't need to. We both knew the truth. Jane was serving up a side of malice with every meal, and I was the main course. I could always tell when Jane had been working on Alex. He'd get this distant look in his eyes, as if he were seeing through me, weighing her words against his own judgment. On this particular evening, a cloud seemed to settle over him, and I knew it before he even spoke. "My mom thinks we should consider." "Well, she thinks we might not be thinking about the future enough," Alex muttered, not meeting my eye as he fumbled with the TV remote. "The future?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my gut. "Yeah, kids and your health issues," he continued, the word issues hanging awkwardly in the air between us. "She talked to you about my allergies again, didn't she?" He sighed, setting the remote down. "She's just worried, Liz. She thinks it's a lot for us to handle, especially if we want a family." I bristled, asserting, "We've talked about this. I've managed so far, haven't I? And there are plenty of people with allergies who have kids." Alex ran a hand through his hair, a sign of stress. I know. It's just she has this way of making me doubt things." The room was quiet for a moment, the tension palpable. I reached for his hand, our fingers intertwining. "We're not fighting. We're on the same side, remember?" He nodded, pulling me into a hug. "You and me against the world, right?" "Right," I said. But as I held him, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jane's words were like weeds threatening to grow wild and choke the life out of the beautiful thing we had. It wasn't just my allergies that needed managing. It was the doubts that could seep into the cracks of even the strongest relationships. The news of my pregnancy was a happy surprise for Alex and me, but a complicated one for everyone else. When we announced it to his parents, Jane's reaction was like watching a robot trying to mimic human emotions. A pause, then a smile that didn't quite match the situation. "We're gonna have a baby, Mom," Alex said, his voice a mix of pride and caution. "That's wonderful," Jane managed to say, the words sounding foreign in her mouth. "We must have a family dinner to celebrate." Celebrations at Jane's were never just celebrations. But I saw the hopeful look in Alex's eyes the night of the dinner arrived, and the house buzzed with relatives. Jane was the perfect hostess, moving gracefully from guest to guest. When she reached us, her smile was practiced. "Congratulations, Liz. This is such a joyous occasion." "Thank you, Jane," I replied, trying to match her formality. "We're excited." Alex wrapped his arm around my waist, a silent thank you for playing along. As dinner approached, I felt a familiar anxiety. A table full of food was a minefield for me, but tonight I hoped would be different. The table was a feast, and I felt every eye on me as I hesitated, my hand hovering over the options. "Go on, dear," Jane urged. "Eat up." "You're eating for two now?" I smiled weakly, choosing the safest options, vegetables and rice, plain and simple. But as I reached for a slice of bread, Jane stopped me. "Actually, maybe not that one," she said quickly. "I'm not sure if the baker used soy flour." I paused, bread in hand, meeting her gaze. There was a flicker of something there, concern, or perhaps it was a challenge. "Thank you for letting me know," I said, placing the bread down. However, warning bells were already ringing in my head. How did she know about the soy flour? It felt like too close a call, too perfect a save. The rest of the meal passed in a blur, with congratulations mingling with the clinking of glasses. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jane's hospitality was a veneer, concealing a trap set and waiting for just the right moment. The family dinner, meant to celebrate our future baby, was nothing short of a banquet. Jane had outdone herself, creating a spread that would make a Thanksgiving dinner look modest. However, my stomach was tied in knots. Not from hunger. Every dish felt like a potential hazard, a hidden enemy that could send me to the hospital. As we all took our seats, lively chatter filled the air, comprising the usual family gossip and stories. Jane, at the head of the table, presided over the feast like a queen in her court. She called everyone to attention with a gentle tap of her glass. "Before we begin, I just want to say how thrilled we are to be celebrating Liz and Alex's upcoming addition to our family," Jane announced, her voice steady and clear. Applause and cheers followed, and I forced a smile, feeling Alex squeeze my hand under the table. "Thank you, everyone," I said. "We're really looking forward to this new chapter in our lives." The meal began, and I tentatively picked at my food, choosing the simplest items. Alex watched me, his brow furrowed with concern. "You doing okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, just being careful," I replied, pushing a roasted potato around my plate. Jane's eyes were on me, and I felt like a specimen under a microscope. "Liz, you haven't touched your salad. The dressing is on the side, just as you like it," she said, her voice tinged with forced cheerfulness. "Thank you, Jane. I'm just not much of an appetite tonight," I said, avoiding the salad that could easily contain hidden allergens. As the dinner wore on, tension grew. Every time Jane offered me something, my anxiety spiked, and the room felt hot, the walls closing in. Then came the cake, a beautiful confection with layers of sponge and cream that drew admiration from the room. Jane cut a slice and handed it to me with a smile that might have been genuine if I hadn't known better. "For the mom-to-be," she said. "I really shouldn't," I said, looking at the cake, then at Alex, then at Jane. "But it looks delicious." "Oh, come on, Liz. One little bite won't hurt. For the baby," Jane pressed, her voice as sweet as the icing. That's when Alex's dad, Mark, stepped in, swiftly knocking the plate from my hands. The cake tumbled to the floor, and stunned silence fell over the room. "What the hell, Dad?" Alex exclaimed, anger and confusion in his voice. Mark stood, his face pale but his voice firm. "I saw the label in the trash. That cake has peanut oil in it." To a room erupted in chaos. Jane's face showed shock, but her eyes betrayed something darker. Fear, maybe guilt. Alex stood, his chair clattering behind him. "Mom, did you know about this?" Jane's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. In that moment, the truth became as clear as the danger on my plate. The room was dead silent after Mark's revelation, the dropped cake like a crime scene on the hardwood floor. Everyone's eyes were locked on Jane, who seemed to shrink under the collective gaze. "Mom, is it true? Did you know?" Alex's voice cut through the tension, sharp and demanding. Jane looked away, her jaw clenched, and for the first time I saw a hint of fear in her eyes. Maybe she realized that her actions hadn't just endangered me, but jeopardized her relationship with her son, her reputation, everything. The rest of the evening was a blur of arguments, tears, and hushed conversations as the family tried to process what had happened. Alex and I left early, the weight of the evening heavy on our shoulders. We didn't speak much on the drive home. What was there to say? The truth was out, and with it, the facade of a polite, if not happy, family was shattered. The drive home was quiet, filled with a heavy silence, loaded with things left unsaid. When we finally walked through our front door, Alex and I just stood there, the echo of the night's drama still ringing in our ears. Alex was the first to break the silence. "I can't believe my own mother would do something like that," he said, his voice hollow. I sat down on the couch, the cushion failing to comfort me. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said, sitting beside me and taking my hands in his. "I'm so sorry, Liz. This is unforgivable." I looked at him, seeing the pain in his eyes, and my heart ached. "It's not your fault, Alex. We couldn't have known she'd go this far." But the truth was there, hanging between us. Jane had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The family was in pieces. Some stood by us, shocked and appalled by Jane's actions, while others struggled to wrap their heads around the reality of the situation. The next few days were a whirlwind. Alex's phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from relatives expressing shock, support, and apologies. Through it all, there was deafening silence from Jane. No apologies, no explanations. Alex finally broke the news to me a week later. "My dad's left her. He can't get past what she did," he said, a twinge of something like regret in his tone. He said it's been a long time coming. I wasn't sure how to feel: relief, sadness, pity. "And Jane?" I asked tentatively. "She's not handling it well. She's alone now," Alex replied, a twinge of regret in his tone. We sat in our living room, the walls we'd painted together, the furniture we'd picked out during countless trips to the store. It was our home, filled with our memories, our love. Outside, there was a storm brewing, one that threatened to uproot everything we knew. In that moment, I realized that no matter what happened, we had each other. We were a team about to bring a new life into the world, and that was what mattered. "I love you, Liz," Alex said, pulling me close. "I love you too," I whispered back. The fallout from that night would linger, and the scars it left on our family would take time to heal. But as I looked at Alex, at the life we'd built, and the future we were about to embark on, I knew that we'd weather any storm together. As for Jane, she was a chapter in our lives that we had closed, a story that we wouldn't let define us. From now on, it was just us, our baby, and the road ahead. Whatever it brought, we'd face it together.
The night shift at Metropolitan General was always challenging, but this one would change everything. I was just finishing my rounds when they brought him in, an elderly man, unconscious, wearing tattered clothes and carrying no ID. Another homeless case. Dr. Richards sighed, barely glancing at the patient. "Put him in the hallway until we clear a non-priority bed." But something about the man's face seemed familiar. Despite his ragged appearance, his hands showed signs of recent professional care. And the way he was clutching a worn leather notebook. "I'll take him to room 712. I decided. It was technically reserved for VIP patients, but it had been empty for weeks. "Are you insane, Sarah?" Amy, the charge nurse, whispered. "If Dr. Harrison finds out you put a homeless man in a VIP suite." Dr. Victoria Harrison wasn't just any hospital administrator. She was the CEO who turned Metropolitan General from a caring community hospital into a profit-focused corporation. Under her leadership, non-priority patients were often left waiting for hours. "Everyone deserves proper care," I replied, remembering my own father's last days in a hospital hallway. "Help me move him." As we transferred the mystery patient, his notebook fell open. I caught a glimpse of complex medical diagrams before quickly closing it. Something wasn't adding up. I spent my entire shift monitoring him, neglecting the paperwork Dr. Harrison always insisted was more important than excessive patient attention. His vitals were stable but concerning. Every instinct told me this man needed careful observation. At 6 a.m., Dr. Harrison's clicking heels announced her early morning inspection. She stopped dead when she saw our hallway empty of waiting patients. "Where are the overflow cases?" she demanded. "Room 712, I answered honestly. "I assessed the situation and..." "You put someone in a VIP suite without authorization." Her perfectly painted lips curled in disgust. "Who?" "John Doe case, approximately 70 years old, brought in at 2 a.m. with..." "A homeless man." She cut me off. "In my VIP wing?" She stormed into room 712, taking in the scene with growing fury. "Are you deliberately trying to destroy this hospital's reputation? He needs proper care." I stood my ground. "His symptoms indicate..." "Your job isn't to think," she snapped. "It's to follow protocols, and protocol says non-paying patients wait in the hallway." "That's not healthcare," I protested. "It's not what Metropolitan General used to stand for." "Used to?" She laughed coldly. "You mean before I turned this failing hospital into a profitable enterprise? Clear this room immediately and consider yourself terminated." "You can't fire her for providing care," Amy spoke up. "I can fire her for misuse of hospital resources," Dr. Harrison smiled. "Security, please escort Nurse Chen out of the building. And move this person to the hallway where he belongs." As security approached, the patient's heart monitor began beeping erratically. I rushed to his side, professional instincts taking over. "Step away from him," Dr. Harrison ordered. "You're no longer employed here." That's when the patient's eyes opened. He looked straight at me, then at Dr. Harrison, and spoke in a clear, educated voice. "Actually, she works for me. We all do." Dr. Harrison froze. "What?" "Thomas Chen," he said calmly, despite the monitor's warnings. "Majority shareholder of Metropolitan General Hospital. And I believe we need to discuss how you've been running my father's legacy." The security guard stepped back. Dr. Harrison's face went from angry red to ghostly white. Because everyone in healthcare knew the Chen name. The family that had built Metropolitan General from a small clinic into a major hospital before mysteriously disappearing 15 years ago. But as Dr. Harrison stammered excuses, I noticed something alarming on the monitors. Mr. Chen's stable condition was rapidly deteriorating, and his next words confirmed my worst fears. "Sarah, I'm afraid I've been poisoned." Code blue. I shouted, already moving to action as Mr. Chen's vitals plummeted. Amy, get me a toxicology kit. Dr. Harrison stood frozen, her perfect composure cracking. Stop, you're not employed here anymore. You can't. Either help or get out of my way, I snapped, starting emergency protocols. Years of ER experience took over as I worked to stabilize him. Mr. Chen grabbed my hand weakly. The notebook, he whispered. Don't let her. But Dr. Harrison had already snatched the worn leather journal from the bedside table. As she flipped through it, her face shifted from confusion to shock to something darker. Security, she said quietly, clear the room. No one comes in or out without my authorization. That man needs immediate care. I protested. Oh, we'll get care, she smiled coldly. The best care money can buy. Just not from you. She held up the notebook. Did you really think we wouldn't figure it out? Thomas, that your little undercover investigation wouldn't be noticed. The security guards looked uncertain. Dr. Harrison, he needs medical attention. What he needs, she cut them off, is to understand that some things should stay buried. Like what really happened to his father 15 years ago. Mr. Chen's monitors were screaming now. But as I moved to help him, one of the security guards grabbed my arm. Not the hospital's regular security, this man wore an earpiece I'd never seen before. The poison, Mr. Chen managed between gasps. It wasn't just me. Check the general supply. Horror dawned as I understood. I've been noticing increased complications in routine cases over the past month. Small things, patients taking longer to recover, unexpected reactions to standard medications. You've been tampering with the hospital's medical supplies, I accused Dr. Harrison. That's why you changed suppliers last month. That's why you've been restricting access to the pharmacy records. She laughed, a harsh, unfamiliar sound. Tampering? I've been correcting a mistake. This hospital was supposed to be mine. Richard Chen promised it to me before his mysterious accident, but he left everything to his idealistic son instead. So you've been slowly poisoning patients, I said in disbelief, making the hospital look incompetent under the Chen family's ownership. Forcing them to sell, she finished smugly. The board meets tomorrow to discuss the hospital's future. Once they see the mortality rates, the malpractice risks. She patted Mr. Chen's hand almost gently. Don't worry, your death will be attributed to your homeless lifestyle. Such a tragic end to the Chen legacy. But she'd forgotten something crucial about emergency rooms. We never work alone. And while she'd been focused on me, Amy had slipped out during the chaos. The room's speaker crackled to life. Code black in progress. All personnel implement Protocol 17 immediately. Dr. Harrison's face went pale. No, that's impossible. That protocol was deleted years ago, was it? Mr. Chen's voice was weak but clear. Or did you just think it was? The light suddenly shifted to ultraviolet, revealing something shocking on Dr. Harrison's hands and clothes. Traces of the very poison she'd been using, glowing in unmistakable blue under the specialized light. But as security moved to detain her, she pulled out a syringe. Nobody move. One step and he gets the full dose. What she didn't notice was the slight smile on Mr. Chen's face, or the fact that his deteriorating vital signs had suddenly stabilized. Interesting syringe, Dr. Harrison, Mr. Chen said, suddenly sounding much stronger. But I believe you'll find it's filled with saline. Dr. Harrison stared at the syringe in her hand, then at the monitors showing Mr. Chen's stabilizing vitals. Impossible, she whispered. The poison was neutralized about 20 minutes ago, I explained, finally understanding. When I accidentally knocked over your coffee during the code blue. The antidote was in my ID badge dispenser, standard issue for all employees under Protocol 17. A protocol you thought you'd erased, Mr. Chen added, sitting up straighter. Just like you thought you'd erase all traces of what happened to my father 15 years ago. The ultraviolet lights continued to reveal damning evidence, blowing traces of various compounds on Dr. Harrison's clothes, hands, and even her designer handbag. You don't understand, she said desperately. Your father was going to ruin everything. His healthcare for all policy was bankrupting us. When he refused to change course. You arranged his accident, Mr. Chen finished. But you made one crucial mistake. Amy returned with a team of FBI agents, led by a familiar face. Dr. Richards, the dismissive doctor from earlier. Agent Sarah Chen. My supposed colleague introduced herself. FBI Healthcare Fraud Division. We've been building this case for months. Dr. Harrison's composure finally shattered completely. The whole thing was a setup. Not exactly, Mr. Chen explained. We knew someone was poisoning patients, but we didn't know who. My homeless admission was a calculated risk to draw out the perpetrator. But Sarah, Dr. Harrison looked at me with dawning horror. She's just a nurse. Is she? Mr. Chen smiled. Or is she the person who first noticed the pattern of complications? The one who started documenting everything in that notebook you're holding, which, by the way, is transmitting everything you've said to the FBI? The notebook in her hand suddenly beeped, its hidden camera capturing her expression as she realized the full scope of the trap. But as agents moved to arrest her, Dr. Harrison pressed a button on her phone. If I'm going down, I'm taking this whole hospital with me. Alarm systems began blaring throughout the building. On the security monitors, we could see emergency doors sealing themselves, trapping patients and staff inside. Dead man's switch, she laughed hysterically. In 15 minutes, every compromised medication in this hospital will be automatically administered through the electronic dispensing system. Hundreds of patients. Unless what? Agent Chen demanded. Unless the Chen family signs over the hospital, completely and permanently. Mr. Chen looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. Because what Dr. Harrison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had one more secret of my own. Actually, I said quietly, removing my nurse's ID badge. The Chen family has already signed over the hospital. I pulled out another badge from my scrubs pocket, one that made Dr. Harrison's eyes go wide. Sarah Chen, MD, PhD, Chief Executive Officer, Metropolitan Health Systems. No, Dr. Harrison breathed. That's impossible. Not impossible, Mr. Chen smiled. Inevitable. You see, Sarah isn't just any nurse. She's my daughter, and more importantly, she's Richard Chen's granddaughter. The pieces clicked into place for everyone watching. Why I worked every position in the hospital, from janitor to nurse. Why I cared so much about every patient. I wasn't just learning the jobs, I was learning my grandfather's legacy from the ground up. The paperwork was finalized last week, I explained, accessing the hospital's main system with my true credentials. Which means your dead man's switch? It's trying to access a system you no longer control. On the monitors, we could see the emergency protocols reversing, doors unlocking, medication systems returning to normal operation. But your father, Dr. Harrison sputtered. Richard Chen died before he could. Before he could what? I asked. Change his will? Name you a successor? I pulled up documents on the nearest screen. Actually, he did something far more important that night. He recorded everything. Security footage began playing, 15 years old but crystal clear. It showed a younger Dr. Harrison in my grandfather's office, demanding control of the hospital. Healthcare is a business, she screamed in the footage, not your personal charity. Healthcare is a right, my grandfather's voice replied calmly. And this hospital will never prioritize profits over patients, not while a Chen is alive to prevent it. The footage showed what happened next. Dr. Harrison's rage, the poison she slipped into his drink, not realizing he'd already swapped the glasses. He survived, Mr. Chen explained. Barely, but he knew the hospital wasn't safe while she remained in power. So he went into hiding, protecting his legacy until the right moment. And that moment, I stepped closer to Dr. Harrison. Was finding someone who could rebuild Metropolitan General from the inside out. Someone who understood every job, every patient, every detail of what makes a hospital work. The FBI agents moved in to arrest her, but Dr. Harrison had one final card to play. She pulled out another phone, a dead man's switch for something far worse. One press, she threatened, and every media outlet gets proof of patient neglect under Chen family management. Your reputation will be destroyed. I almost laughed. You mean the carefully documented cases of neglect you orchestrated? The ones we've been tracking and correcting for months? Check your phone's signal. She pressed the button repeatedly, growing more frantic. Nothing happened. Hospital rooms have excellent signal blocking, I explained, especially when you know which frequencies to target. As they led her away in handcuffs, the morning shift arrived to find their hospital transformed. The homeless patient was now revealed as the long-lost Thomas Chen. The fired nurse was their new CEO. And most importantly, the hospital was returning to its original mission. 1 year later, Metropolitan General leads the country in patient care quality. I still work nursing shifts regularly, now with my real name badge. My father handles the business side while I focus on medicine, continuing my grandfather's legacy of putting patients first. Dr. Harrison serves her sentence in a minimum security prison, where she's required to provide basic medical care to fellow inmates. Sometimes the best karma is being forced to give the very thing you tried to deny others. The notebook that captured everything. It sits in my office, a reminder that the most important medical tool isn't technology or money. It's the willingness to care for every patient, regardless of their appearance or ability to pay. After all, you never know when the homeless person in your emergency room might turn out to be someone extraordinary, or more importantly, when an ordinary person might need extraordinary care. Where did that go? Where did it disappear to? What's going on? Well, while I was pondering the situation, my husband received a demotion at work because he seemed to be making more mistakes. He had never been particularly dedicated to his job, so the demotion didn't come as much of a surprise to him. However, his memory lapses became increasingly frequent, prompting us to visit the hospital for a checkup. Music. I initially thought it might be depression, but the diagnosis turned out to be early onset Alzheimer's. In simple terms, he was dealing with dementia. I had heard that even young individuals could develop the condition, but I was still shocked to learn my husband had it. My name is Katie Smith. 5 years have passed since then. I'm now 50 years old and my husband is 54. We didn't have children, so I continued working. My parents have passed away, but my husband's parents are still alive and well. They live in the countryside, not far from us. His parents are very kind, and when my husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they offered to take him in and suggested I consider divorce. Music. However, my husband, who had always disliked living in the country, firmly opposed the idea. I chose not to pursue divorce solely because of his illness. We've been married for nearly 20 years, united by love, and not just by the vows of sickness and health. It didn't seem right to abandon him simply because he had fallen ill. Though my husband's memory lapses have increased, he can still lead a relatively normal life. Perhaps the medication he takes to manage the disease is working. It's not too bad because he can still function in many aspects of daily life, and he recognizes me. Although he occasionally doesn't respond to me, when he does, he behaves much like any other person. However, when I ask him specific questions, he often says he doesn't remember or isn't sure. His mistakes at work became more frequent, and he would sometimes become emotional when he struggled with paperwork. He once told me, "I'm thinking of leaving the company. Would you support me if I quit?" Unable to refuse my worried husband, I supported his decision, and he eventually left the company. He now spends most of his time at home, but he doesn't exhibit any problematic behavior while he's there. Sometimes he leaves things out or makes a mess in the kitchen. But since he isn't causing harm to others, it's within an acceptable range of behavior. My husband has been home ever since he left his job. I spoke with the doctor about arranging for someone to watch over him while I'm at work. The doctor reassured me that he still has the ability to recognize danger, so there's no immediate need for extra care. He mentioned that we would revisit the situation as the disease progresses. For now, the doctor advised me to remind my husband to lock the door when he goes out and to avoid going out alone. I was somewhat worried about whether he would be okay with these instructions, but he repeatedly insisted that he was fine being on his own and sometimes grew frustrated when I pressed the matter. "Stop nagging. I'm sick. You're just making me more confused with all this unnecessary talk. Show me some compassion." In the end, I had to give him some space because I couldn't manage his outbursts. 5 years before my husband was diagnosed at 40, I had been promoted to section manager. My salary increased, so even though my husband left his job, we didn't face any immediate financial strain. Since we don't have children, we had managed to save a good amount over the years, providing us with a safety net when needed. Our savings remain untouched, and I'm grateful to still be working. I hope life will continue to be as normal as possible. However, there's one issue that's been troubling me lately. items around the house often go missing. The missing items include my beloved designer bags, recently purchased shoes and clothes, and other costly possessions. I had saved up to treat myself to these items as rewards. I've searched everywhere, thinking I might have misplaced them, but I can't seem to find them. When I asked my husband about it, he could only say, "I don't know." I inquired further, "Did you remember taking them anywhere?" His response remained the same, "No, I don't remember." My husband's responses are becoming increasingly repetitive. I wonder if his illness has advanced to the point where he doesn't even recall taking the missing items out of the house. When I return from work and ask about his day, his frequent reply is, "I can't remember." The doctor explained that the progression of the disease can vary, sometimes slow and other times rapid. Yet I couldn't shake the worry that it might be accelerating. If this were the case, leaving him alone while I'm at work would become a concern. The thought of him wandering off alone is unsettling. I wouldn't be able to manage his care on my own if he were to stray. My anxiety about my husband's well-being led me to install surveillance cameras in the house without informing him. What if he starts wandering and causing trouble for others? I'd be devastated if that were to occur. If such a situation arose, I'd have to confront it head-on. A week later, while my husband slept, I nervously reviewed the footage captured by the camera. What I witnessed was beyond anything I had anticipated, leaving me utterly astonished. Unbeknownst to me, my husband was bringing another woman into our home. For the past 5 years, I hadn't been able to engage in meaningful conversation with him. His responses to my questions were always vague, yet in the video he conversed with ease, free of any barriers. It was difficult to reconcile this with his dementia diagnosis. Furthermore, I was taken aback when I recognized the woman accompanying him. She was none other than the doctor who had diagnosed my husband with dementia. The very hospital where we had sought medical advice was affiliated with his former workplace. Was this some kind of twisted joke between my husband and the female doctor? Or could the dementia diagnosis be entirely fabricated? Are you sure she hasn't discovered the truth? Not in the slightest. Dementia is a handy excuse. I don't have to work, and I can easily claim I don't remember when it suits me. What a terrible man you are. Your wife is out working while you stay at home and bring your mistress here. You were the one who suggested it. When I told you I was tired of my job and wanted to leave, you said it was a good idea. I didn't think it would work so smoothly. The woman crossed her legs, laughing with my husband as they spoke. She's so full of herself. I'm not sure if she got promoted to section chief or something, but her salary keeps going up. She's definitely earning more than me and moving ahead. She probably thinks she's better than me, but thanks to her, we can enjoy moments like this. She's basically our ATM, so she needs to keep working hard. Did you say she's just your housekeeper now? Yep, she's both my housekeeper and ATM. I felt my mind go blank as the words on the screen echoed in my head. Oh, and Hannah, don't take too many things out of the house because my wife has noticed items missing. She suggested you take things out and just pretend they're gone. Well, I can always say I forgot due to my condition. Exactly, this illness is the perfect cover. Now I can coast through life without having to work anymore. So that's the reality of it. What have I been doing all this time, silently supporting him? For 5 years, I poured my energy into working tirelessly and managing the household, unaware of the truth. I felt foolish, like all my strength had been sapped from my body. Suddenly, uncontrollable laughter erupted from within me. I wondered if I was losing my mind. That's how overwhelmed I was, anger, sadness, frustration, and despair all mingling together. And the despair didn't stop there. When I checked my bank account, I found it drained to zero. Every penny I'd saved since our marriage had vanished. I felt utterly adrift. It felt like the world had ended. As the morning light seeped in, I found myself numb. My husband greeted the day with a carefree expression, and seeing him stirred a rage within my hollowed soul. Where's breakfast? I wanted to grab him by the collar and unleash every ounce of fury, but I managed to hold myself back. My husband still had no clue that I knew the truth. I struggled with the urge to confront him and demand an apology on the spot. But I was unsure of how to proceed. Even if I lashed out at him, I knew he would simply smile and say, "You found out, didn't you? What are your plans for today? What's going on? You've never asked me that before. I'm just curious about what you do at home all day. I wish I could work like you, but with my condition, I just end up causing trouble for others. I'm envious of your ability to work." I couldn't believe how brazen his words were. Given the evidence of his infidelity, I knew I could use it as grounds for seeking alimony and a divorce. But reflecting on the last 5 years brought me to tears. People who act so shamelessly often try to downplay their actions with excuses and implausible explanations. A few days passed as I contemplated my next steps. Just seeing my husband made me feel sick, but I held my composure. The camera remained in place. Unaware that I knew the truth, my husband continued bringing the doctor into our home while I was away. "Hey, did anyone come by today? I thought I smelled someone else." He responded, "Well, someone might have come by, but I don't really remember. Maybe it was a salesperson." "So how are you feeling? You seem to be doing better lately. Is the treatment helping?" "I don't think so. I feel like I've been getting more forgetful. The doctor told me the disease can be slowed down, but it can't be cured." "That's right. That doctor was quite attractive, wasn't she?" "Was she?" I can't seem to recall her face. I was almost impressed by how convincingly he kept up his act for so long. I couldn't just sit idly by, so I decided to visit my in-laws with a recorded video, without telling my husband. They have always been kind and thoughtful toward me, but they are my husband's parents, so I worried they might take his side. "Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I'm sorry for reaching out unexpectedly, but I have something important to discuss with you." "What's wrong? You look so worn out. What happened?" "Come on in. Are you hungry? I'll fix you something warm to eat." My mother-in-law's words almost brought me to tears. It was a relief to realize I had nothing to worry about. When my in-laws saw the video of my husband's affair with the female doctor, they immediately knelt down and apologized. "Our foolish son. I'm so sorry, Katie. I truly apologize." Rather than blaming me, they cried and held my hands, causing me to cry as well. It felt as though all the tension I'd been holding onto melted away in that moment. While my anger at my husband remained, I was deeply moved to know I had their support. Something else that made me happy was a surprise offer for a promotion to a department head position. It was gratifying to know my hard work was being recognized. I felt reassured that I had a place where my efforts were valued. "Hey, Katie, are you listening to me?" "Huh? Oh, sorry, I got lost in my thoughts for a moment." I had been contemplating how to best punish my husband and had gotten caught up in my thoughts. "It's not funny if you both end up with dementia." His words sparked an idea in my mind. "Would you take care of me if I did end up with dementia?" "Forget it. I've got enough on my plate without taking care of you too." My husband looked at me in shock at my response. Since then, I've been trying to echo more of his previous words each day to make the scenario seem more convincing. "Hey, what was I doing just now? I've been making so many mistakes at work lately. I seem to be forgetting things. I forgot how to use the washing machine and how to cook rice." My husband grew increasingly anxious. "You're still working, but I'm grateful you're here." One day, I came home from work to find my husband gone. He left behind completed divorce papers and a note. "I don't want to burden you any further, so I've decided to divorce you. Please don't try to find me, Ken." I knew he left because he believed I might have dementia. Moreover, I knew exactly where he had gone. My husband had rented an apartment to continue his relationship with a female doctor, as revealed in the hidden video. He told her, "I'm getting a divorce. I can't be bothered taking care of her if she ends up with dementia. I've moved my savings to another account so I won't need to worry about my finances for a while," he said, laughing. He also provided her with his new apartment's location. I learned where she lived from their conversation, so I headed to her neighborhood. The female doctor was married and lived in a suburban home with her family. I immediately filed the divorce papers and sent an invoice for alimony and property division to my husband's newly rented apartment. Naturally, I also sent the female doctor a bill for alimony via certified mail. It seemed my husband received it, as he called me right away. "What on earth is this, alimony?" "Yes, it's for your infidelity." "What? Oh right, I sent it to that lady doctor as well. I imagine her husband has learned about it by now, and they must be facing difficulties." Along with the invoice I sent to the female doctor, I also forwarded the hidden camera footage to my husband. Her husband had the right to know what had happened. "You sneaky, how did you find out?" To be honest, I was surprised too. I couldn't believe it was all a lie. "I thought you were losing your mind. You know I was just imitating you. You're so easy to fool, aren't you?" My husband chose to ignore his actions and began shouting at me. He accused me, "You think I'm being dishonest? You have the nerve to be angry after pretending to have dementia for 5 years and living off my income. You even brought another woman into the house. Do you think that's acceptable?" It seemed my husband never imagined that I knew everything. Then he stammered, "But what do you mean by property division? I don't own anything. We have your savings." "Oh, I already spent it all. Not a penny left." I was amazed he had come this far and was still lying. I told him I had planted a camera in her house and that I had heard every word he told the female doctor. I informed him I had the footage as evidence. I have irrefutable proof. When I informed him that his parents were aware of the situation and were furious, he erupted into another fit of yelling, demanding, "How dare you involve them in this?" He seemed oblivious to the fact that he had no right to shout at me now. Thankfully, his incessant ranting spared me the expense of hiring a private investigator. Upon hearing this, my husband fell silent for a moment, seemingly at a loss for words, before abruptly ending the call. The following month, I received another unexpected call. "What's going on?" "What do you mean?" I went to the apartment and they said it had already been canceled. "Which apartment?" "The one we used to live in, obviously." I couldn't help but think to myself that he was the one who initiated the divorce proceedings, so I hadn't anticipated his return. When I told him that I had canceled the lease immediately after he left, he became angry and demanded to know why I hadn't informed him of my actions. I explained that, as he was unemployed, he could no longer be the tenant on the apartment lease. So when he quit his job, I changed the lease to my name. This gave me control over when to terminate the lease and decide where to move next. I ended up purchasing a condo, which I now call home. "You bought it?" "Yes, using the alimony from you and your mistress, along with the savings I recovered. It's a small place, but it's my own haven." "Really?" "Yes, so you won't be coming over." He seemed surprised by my response. "You have a girlfriend, don't you?" "I already broke up with her. Her husband found out she was cheating and divorced her. She's been blamed at work for making a diagnostic error and is being sued by a patient. Both her husband and you are suing her for alimony, leaving her in significant debt." "Really? Well, I decided I want to start over with you. That way, the alimony will be canceled and I can get the money back." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did he really think I would take him back? He was suggesting that we reconcile, implying that the alimony being pursued by her husband could be returned to me. I was almost tempted to ask him if he had lost his mind. "You've got to be kidding. Why would I pay you anything? We're divorced. I never want to see you again. There's no chance I'm taking you back." With that, I hung up the phone and blocked all incoming calls from him. Apparently, my ex-husband then went to visit his parents. Little did he know that they had sold their house and moved into a retirement community. They told me he was shocked when he arrived at their house and saw it was up for sale, prompting him to reach out to them. With a lawyer handling the collection of property division and alimony payments, my ex-husband was left with little money in his pocket. Unable to secure a new job and unable to pay his rent, he was evicted from his apartment and had nowhere to go. He must have turned to his parents for help. Anticipating this, they had moved out, knowing that if he returned, they might struggle to remove him again. They told me they would have felt sorry for me if he had tried to move back in with them. I heard he now works as a live-in employee at a factory, but he's too lazy to work much, resulting in daily scoldings and even beatings from younger employees. He has reached out to his parents several times for assistance, but they have consistently refused him. Months have passed since the divorce, and I continue to stay in touch with his parents. They remain concerned for my well-being and have become like my own parents. I plan to maintain a close relationship with them, and if they ever need assistance, I'll be there for them. I've recently been promoted to department manager and my salary has gone up. I'm committed to working hard and am thoroughly enjoying my peaceful life on my own. My name is Sarah, and I'm married to Tom. We've been married for 2 years now. I really wanted to have kids by now, but it hasn't happened yet. I like my job, it makes me feel important, so I'm not in a rush to have kids. But Tom feels differently. He recently told me he's upset that we haven't had kids yet. How long until we have a baby? Please, hurry up. My mom can't wait, he said. I went to the hospital, but the doctors said nothing was wrong with me. If you want, we can get you checked up too, I suggested to Tom. You're saying it's my fault we can't have kids. It can't be me, Tom argued. How can you be so sure? Sometimes it's the men who have issues, I replied. I can't be the problem. Stop saying that, Tom insisted. Well, if neither of us has fertility problems, let's see it as a good thing and wait a bit longer, I suggested. Why are you going easy on yourself? My mom really wants to meet her grandkids soon, Tom kept insisting. Every time Tom sees his mom, she asks, is the baby here yet? He's still refusing to get checked at the hospital, even though it's causing issues. He's sure he's not the reason we can't have kids. I got another checkup because I was worried, but everything seemed fine. Tom doesn't get that we only have one chance each month to have a baby. He keeps asking, are you ready for a baby yet? I'm tired of him and Mom asking, are you ready for a baby yet? Mom said the same thing today. She wants to see her grandchild's face soon, I complained. Again, please let's hurry up. Mom really wants it, Tom urged. We can't rush this, I explained. Every time we talk, it feels like we end up in the same argument. We've been having fewer and fewer conversations lately. Maybe it's because we don't talk much, but it's causing a lot of problems like this, I reflected. Mom's on her way, Tom suddenly announced. Right now, I exclaimed. Why does it matter? If she's coming, let me know so I can prepare. You're talking too much, Tom snapped back. She has a message for you, he added. Is it about kids again? I sighed. I've had enough. I don't care anymore, Tom muttered. That's what I hear every time I see her. It's your fault we can't have kids, so you need to explain it to her, I said, feeling frustrated. Just then, my mother-in-law walked in as we were talking. I'm sorry to interrupt. Here, I brought this for you, she said, handing me something. What is it? I asked. You can check them out yourself. They're a belly band and a lucky charm, she explained. What's the belly band for? I asked. It's important to keep your stomach cool when trying to have a baby, so you should use it, she advised. But it's too hot to wear a fuzzy belly band in the summer, I objected. You're looking at it the wrong way. This room is too cold because of the air conditioning. It chills your stomach, she argued. And how does this amulet work? I asked. It's a lucky charm from a famous temple for kids. After praying there, I heard that a celebrity had a baby. It seemed to bring good luck, so I went there yesterday despite the distance, she explained. You didn't need to go that far, I said. Don't worry just because you're more relaxed about this. As I've said before, I really want to see my grandkids. I went to the hospital, and it's not me, I repeated. Tom was sitting away from us, acting like he wasn't involved. Why haven't you gotten pregnant yet? My mother-in-law suddenly asked me. I'm not sure why you're asking, I replied. Why don't you try another hospital for a second opinion? Maybe a specialized hospital? I'll help you find one, she suggested. You don't have to do that. I'm sure it's not Tom, so I can only think it's because of you, I responded. Tom hasn't been checked yet. How can you be so sure he's not infertile? My mother-in-law asked. Because Tom, who seemed like he wasn't paying attention, interrupted the conversation. Mom, don't say things that aren't necessary, he advised. Sorry, my mother-in-law stopped talking suddenly. I think a package will be delivered by courier tomorrow, so please accept it, she said. I just wanted to give you this today, so I'll leave now, my mother-in-law announced before leaving me with only a belly band and a lucky charm for the baby. The next day, when the package arrived, I couldn't help but laugh. Inside were all sorts of good luck charms for having a baby. Your mom sent me a package. What was in it? I asked Tom. Pomegranates, herring roe, and peaches, he replied. Why did she send those? I wondered. All three are seen as lucky foods that are supposed to bring good fortune for having kids, he explained. I get it. Mom really wants to see her grandkids, I thought out loud. I understand she's excited, but it feels a bit overwhelming, Tom remarked. Why are you talking about Mom like that? She's genuinely thrilled about having a grandchild, Tom defended. Don't you feel pressured too? I asked. Yeah, but I'm not worried. It's not my problem. It doesn't concern me, he replied. What do you mean it doesn't concern you? It's our issue because we're together, I argued. It's your problem that we can't have kids, so no, it's not my concern, he retorted. It feels like it's my fault that we can't conceive, even though the hospital says there's nothing wrong with me. So why don't you go to another hospital for a thorough checkup like my mom suggested? I proposed. Why don't you ask her to help find a good hospital? He suggested. The hospital I went to is well known for fertility treatments. But maybe it's just famous, not actually good, I speculated. If you're suggesting that, why not ask your mom to find one? He suggested. Are you finally willing to do it? I asked. Yes, if you also get checked out, he agreed. Why should I go to the hospital? I questioned. I couldn't understand why Tom was so confident. Then he dropped a bombshell on me. I've never mentioned it before, but you've been suspicious for a while, and I'm tired of hiding it. So I'll tell you, Tom confessed. What is it? I asked, confused. I've actually been married before, Tom revealed. What? What do you mean? I exclaimed, shocked. I got divorced 2 years before marrying you, he admitted. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded. Well, I got divorced because my ex cheated on me. She didn't ask for child support or anything, so I didn't think it was important to mention, he explained. Are you saying you have children? I asked, bewildered. A son, yes. I haven't seen him since he was born after the divorce, he confessed. I'm lost. I don't understand what you're saying, I admitted. That proves I'm not incapable of having kids. That's why you were so sure it wasn't me, he pointed out. I'm hurt that you think it's me, but it's possible you became infertile in the 2 years after your divorce, I argued. You're still blaming others. You're the issue, so own up to it and do something about it, he accused. I'm not talking about admitting or not admitting. You're starting to annoy me, I shot back. In my 2nd year of marriage, I learned for the first time that Tom had been divorced and had a child. Even after hearing his story, I still wasn't completely convinced that I was to blame for our inability to have kids. I decided to dig deeper into Tom's past. I planned to ask for a divorce once I finished my research. I couldn't bear to stay with Tom any longer. I tried my best to avoid talking to him because he always said hurtful things to me. And of course, we never had intimate relations under such strained circumstances, so pregnancy was out of the question. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, unaware of our situation, continued to pressure me about having children. Then, one day, Tom approached me looking irritated. By now, I was accustomed to being treated with disdain. He spoke up. I've been thinking about getting a divorce. We don't talk anymore. All we do is fight, and we haven't been able to have kids no matter how long I wait, he declared. I was surprised by his sudden announcement, but I responded calmly. Okay, that's fine. What? Tom was puzzled by my response. He must have expected me to object. Here are the divorce papers. I've filled out all the necessary information already, he stated. What? Why are they already filled out? I asked, shocked. I filled them out so I could end things whenever I wanted. Do you want a divorce? He asked. Yes, I replied, only partly joking. I'm not joking. Do you really want this? He pressed. You said it yourself, I reminded him. I didn't think it would come to this. Did you expect me to beg you not to go through with it? He questioned. Well, we hardly talk anymore, so I thought maybe this was a chance for us to talk and fix things, I explained. Then why didn't you say that from the start? He asked. I wanted things to go back to how they were. But that's not possible, I replied. I'll divorce you right now if that's what you want, he offered. That's not what I want, I admitted. Despite Tom's offer for a divorce, he continued to complain. Our conversations went on, even though it seemed pointless. Then my mother-in-law arrived, right on time. What's going on? She asked. I went out with some friends and got you some gifts, she said, handing me another charm. I visited a different shrine known for childbirth, so I got you this. I've been praying there, and I'm sure it'll bring you good luck this time. We don't need this anymore, I declared. My mother-in-law's face lit up at my words, but I could tell she had misunderstood something. I had a feeling things were about to get complicated again. Well, does this mean you no longer need it? She asked eagerly. Finally? I guess it's because of all my efforts. I'm so relieved, she exclaimed. That's partly right. We need to go back to show our gratitude, she suggested. We? I asked. My mother-in-law stood before me, looking happy. Tom stood beside me, silent, avoiding eye contact. I knew my next words would disappoint my mother-in-law. What is it exactly? Please don't tell me you're about to say what I think you're going to say, she urged. We've decided to get a divorce, I announced. What? Divorce? I thought you were expecting a baby, she replied, shocked. We were just talking about it. Is this a sudden decision? She pressed. Not really. I've been thinking about it for a while, I explained. Are you leaving because you can't have kids? She speculated. No, that's not why I'm divorcing him, I clarified. Well, if you can't get pregnant, maybe it's better for him to divorce you and marry someone else, she suggested. It would be his third marriage, not second. You know that? I reminded her. I found out recently. His ex-wife got pregnant soon after they divorced, she revealed. Okay, I responded, feeling a mix of emotions. So I can only assume you're to blame. If you leave, I'll feel relieved, Tom's mother asserted. I understand. Tom has always been popular with women. He'll find someone soon. Hopefully, our next meeting will bring better news, I replied. Well, if you've made up your mind, get divorced soon. I'm leaving. You two sort out the rest, my mother-in-law declared before leaving, unaware of the whole truth. Once she left, Tom and I continued our conversation. Let's file for divorce right away. I want to start a family soon, and I realize I don't enjoy spending time with you anymore. Let's just get it over with, Tom suggested. Then do it quickly, I replied, handing him the papers to fill out. All I have to do is submit them. By the way, you'll have to leave the house when we divorce, I informed him. What? Why? Tom questioned. I've been making mortgage payments, have you forgotten? My parents paid off the loan and bought this house outright. You were just repaying my parents' loan, I clarified. Oh, so you're leaving because of this? Tom realized. We did have quite a bit of money saved up, he continued. I don't have any money saved, but didn't you say you had around 10 million? I reminded him. That's the money I saved before we got married, so it's not included in the property division, he explained. Right, I confirmed. Well, it doesn't matter. You're starting a new chapter, he remarked. Yes, and I'm also going to sue you and your mother for emotional distress, I declared. What? Why? Tom asked, surprised. For all the hurtful things you've said to me, treating me like I'm defective, I explained. But it's true, Tom argued. Do you really think I'm the reason we couldn't conceive? I challenged. It's obvious. I have a biological child, Tom insisted. That's when I revealed everything to Tom, shocking him. It turns out your child from your ex-wife might not be yours, I revealed. What are you talking about? Tom asked, bewildered. I got curious about Tom's past after learning about his previous marriage, so I decided to look for clues in his house. Eventually, I found a picture, I explained. Tom tends to hold onto old memories, and I found a few tucked away in a drawer in his work desk, I continued. I looked up his ex-wife's name on social media and found her profile right away. From there, I learned more about who she was, I revealed. Isn't this your ex-wife? I showed him a screen from social media. Tom looked surprised, but I wasn't shocked. Is the child in this picture really yours? I asked him. Tom seemed puzzled. I continued with my story. This child clearly looks foreign. I was looking at your ex-wife's social media, and her husband is from another country. I'm not familiar with him. It seems they're living abroad, I explained. I divorced my ex-wife quickly because she cheated on me, but before the divorce, she got pregnant and claimed it was our child. I'm pretty sure it was his child, Tom admitted. Really? I asked. In any case, you don't have any biological children, I pointed out. Could I be the reason you can't conceive? Tom wondered. That's likely. I went to another hospital, and my body was fine. I'm going to get checked out too, I replied. Will you drop the divorce and go through treatment with me if I'm the reason you haven't been able to conceive? Tom asked. Why would I do that? I've already filled out the divorce papers. I'll file them tomorrow, I replied. Don't say that. I still care about you, Tom confessed. You don't enjoy being around me, do you? You'll find someone new soon, just as your mother predicted, I remarked. Let's discuss it again, Tom suggested. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, and I want you to pack your things and leave this week, I insisted. Oh no, Tom muttered. You wanted a divorce, didn't you? I reminded him. I'll talk to my lawyer about alimony. He'll hear from us. The next day, I filed for divorce. Tom moved out reluctantly back to his parents' place. It seems Tom hasn't told his mother that he might be the reason for our infertility. She's been pushing him to remarry quickly after the divorce, hoping for grandchildren. If he does remarry, I feel sorry for his next wife. His mother will probably pressure her too for not having children. Since the divorce, I've thrown myself into my work. I sold the house Tom, and I shared for a good price and repaid my parents the money they lent me, as well as the alimony I received from Tom and his mother. Now I'm living in an apartment. I've started dating a coworker who was supportive during my divorce. We were friends before, and now we're living together. If I marry this man, I hope we'll be blessed with children and that I'll find happiness again. My mother-in-law made it clear that anyone unwilling to contribute to household chores was unwelcome in her home. She seemed to expect an apology from me, perhaps even some remorse. Meanwhile, my husband sat beside her, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, as if he took pleasure in watching me being reprimanded. But to their surprise, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. "I'll leave," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. It was the first time I felt no hesitation in the face of their demands. In that moment, I realized it was no longer my concern to worry about their actions or attitudes. They would eventually have to face the consequences of their behavior. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm 40 years old. I balance a full-time job with managing our household, my husband Andrew, and I have 3 adult children who have moved out to start their own lives. When we envisioned this stage of our lives, it was supposed to be our time to enjoy each other's company. But everything changed when my mother-in-law, widowed and needing companionship, moved in with us. Her arrival shifted the dynamic in our home, which had once been peaceful and shared only between Andrew and me. My job is demanding, often requiring late hours at the office, and by the time I return home, I am exhausted. The sight that greets me only adds to my frustration. The living room is cluttered with snacks and clothes, and Andrew, seemingly oblivious to the chaos, lounges on the sofa with his beer and TV, barely acknowledging my presence. No dinner is prepared, leaving me to handle the kitchen duties myself, my disappointment growing with every passing minute. My mother-in-law, often emerging from her room, criticizes me for being late or for my business trips, claiming I have no excuse for neglecting the home. She accuses me of failing as a homemaker, turning every minor issue into an attack on my character. Over time, I've learned that responding only escalates the situation. It's better to let her have her say and wait for her to calm down. Though this approach isn't ideal, it prevents further arguments and keeps the peace, at least for a while. I absorb her criticisms in silence and redirect my focus to preparing dinner. Though her words sting, I push through, knowing they will stop eventually. What's harder to tolerate, however, is my husband's reaction. He seems to take pleasure in watching me be scolded by his mother. "Women should appreciate their husbands. You lack charm," she often says, and he echoes her, mocking me as I lay the dinner table. My anger isn't just directed at her, it's growing toward Andrew as well. Despite my repeated pleas for them to start dinner without me when I'm late, they never do. They sit idly by, waiting for me to serve them, as though I'm their servant. The dynamic in our home has worsened since my mother-in-law moved in. Before her arrival, Andrew was a true partner, helping around the house, cooking when I was late, and actively participating in raising our kids. But now, he's stopped helping altogether and joined his mother in her constant criticism. It's confusing and frustrating. She calls me lazy and incompetent, yet she's the one relying on us. She hasn't contributed financially despite inheriting money from her late husband. Instead, she squandered it on luxuries and accumulated debt. Now she lives with us, virtually rent-free. This tension began the moment she moved in. She promised to be considerate, even bowing deeply in a show of sincerity. But within a day, she reverted to her old ways, criticizing my housekeeping. At first, it was almost amusing, but it quickly became serious. She accused me of being a poor wife because of my focus on work, criticizing not only my housekeeping but my professional commitments as well. I tried explaining that my job sometimes demands late hours, but my words fell on deaf ears. Instead, she suggested I take a part-time job at the local supermarket, as if that would somehow be more suitable. She had a fixed idea of what a daughter-in-law should be like, but little understanding of the realities of my job. Living with her became increasingly difficult. Every dissatisfaction, even with something as trivial as our meal choices, led to complaints. Even simple routines like breakfast became issues. We used to grab bread or buy lunch, but she disapproved of these habits. Reluctantly, she began following our household rules, but not without constant grumbling. Dinner time became the focal point of contention. She insisted it be served promptly at 7:00 p.m. with at least 3 side dishes, demanding that everyone eat together. She claimed this was what normal families did, but my work often kept me well past 7:00 p.m., making her demands unreasonable. She doubted the necessity of my job, suggesting Andrew's income should suffice and implying that my work was more a matter of personal choice than financial necessity. When I looked to Andrew for support, he simply dismissed my concerns, suggesting I'd learn my lesson eventually. His lack of defense only deepened my frustration. He seemed content to play the indifferent husband, incapable of contributing to household chores. This behavior irritated me even more because when we first moved in with my mother-in-law, he had promised to support me. But since then, he had aligned himself with her, abandoning his role as my partner. They had teamed up against me, treating me unfairly. Whenever I tried to involve Andrew in the housework, my mother-in-law would promptly interject, declaring that such tasks were the wife's responsibility. Andrew, to my growing frustration, never challenged her. This shift in dynamics left me bewildered. We had always worked well together before, but now something had changed. Over time, I began to notice a disturbing pattern. Each time his mother criticized me, Andrew would smirk, almost as if he found it amusing. That's when it hit me. Maybe he resented the fact that I earned more than he did and felt uncomfortable with the idea of sharing household duties as a result. This realization made me rethink many aspects of our relationship and how it had shifted since his mother moved in with us. Andrew, traditionally seen as the family provider, couldn't openly express dissatisfaction, but I began to suspect that he was secretly enjoying the situation. When his mother first moved in, she frequently criticized my role in the household, openly questioning whether Andrew was truly the head of the family. There was a certain satisfaction he seemed to derive from being scolded, which revealed a side of him I hadn't fully acknowledged before. Despite all the years we'd been together, I felt like I was discovering a different person entirely. The atmosphere at home, once peaceful, was now clouded with constant tension. My mother-in-law's incessant complaints and Andrew's failure to stand up for me made everything harder. Before she arrived, I had never felt the need to question our relationship, but now, everything felt unstable. I spent many anxious days wondering what to do next. One afternoon, while I was out shopping, a neighbor approached me with a remark that caught me completely off guard. She suggested I should be more considerate towards my mother-in-law. Surprised, I asked her to elaborate. She confessed that although she wasn't fond of her own mother-in-law, she didn't consider herself inconsiderate. Then she shared something unsettling. My mother-in-law had been talking about me behind my back. According to her, I neglected all the housework. The house was always a mess, and the laundry was never done. She claimed her rheumatism was getting worse because she had to do the chores herself, especially with Andrew coming home late from work. Hearing how I was being portrayed as a neglectful wife who only relied on bread for meals, leaving my mother-in-law to complain about everything, was shocking. It quickly became clear that the cold, unfriendly reactions I was receiving from the neighbors were the result of the stories my mother-in-law had been spreading. Despite her small, frail appearance, she knew exactly how to manipulate others, painting herself as a victim of a lazy daughter-in-law who shirked all household duties. The look the neighbor gave me was one of cold accusation, a reflection of how these harmful tales had shaped people's perception of me. I felt a deep sense of embarrassment, realizing that our family issues had become fodder for neighborhood gossip. I muttered a quick denial and rushed back home, hoping to avoid further confrontation. As I entered the living room, I braced myself for the next round of criticism. I found my mother-in-law engrossed in her TV show, snacking away as usual. Taking a deep breath, I approached her firmly, saying, "Please stop spreading rumors." To my dismay, she just laughed and brushed it off, insisting, "But it's true." Something inside me snapped. If she was determined to keep spreading these lies, then I would no longer play the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law. The very next day after returning from work, I was met with the usual demands for dinner. This time, however, I bypassed both my husband and my mother-in-law's complaints and went straight to the kitchen. I prepared just a single serving of instant ramen for myself. When my mother-in-law saw what I was doing, her face turned crimson and her protest grew louder. "So you're just proving you're the worst daughter-in-law, huh? Not doing any housework, not even cooking dinner. Fine, if that's how you want it," she snapped angrily. I continued eating my noodles in silence, unbothered by her outburst. Eventually, she turned to Andrew, seeking his support. When he approached me, I laid everything out. "Mom's been telling everyone that I'm a terrible daughter-in-law who neglects the housework." When I confronted her, she just doubled down on her lies. "So I've decided to stop doing it altogether. I'm just doing what she's been telling everyone I do." I shared what the neighbor had told me the day before. Andrew, looking concerned, tried to mediate. "She probably just exaggerated. Don't be so stubborn," he said, despite his mother clearly being in the wrong. But once again, he sided with her. Exhausted and drained, I discarded the empty ramen cup and ignored his pleas. I walked away and retreated to the bathroom, where I did my laundry and took a long, quiet bath. As I soaked, a wave of relief washed over me. It became clear that, no matter how hard I tried, I was always going to be seen as the bad wife. From that moment on, I made the decision to stop engaging in the household tasks my mother-in-law criticized me for. She bemoaned the lack of freshly baked bread for breakfast on my days off, but I remained resolute. When I woke up the next morning and stepped into the living room, she demanded that I go out and buy bread immediately. In response, I looked at her and said, "Why don't you buy it yourself? I'm such a bad wife, after all. I'll only buy my share from now on. You'll need to pay for your own food or handle it yourself." With that, I ignored her protests, made myself coffee, and quickly ate my bread. As I watched her reaction, part of me wondered if I had been too harsh, but after everything I had endured, it felt justified. After finishing my breakfast, I tidied only my part of the cluttered living room and settled down with a book. The calm didn't last long, however. The doorbell rang. I glanced at the monitor, bracing myself for whatever came next. I was startled to see a group of more than 4 elderly people, familiar faces I knew well, standing in front of my door with visibly upset expressions. Confused, I watched as my mother-in-law hurried to greet them, and they filed into the house one after the other. I was taken aback when one of them sharply addressed me. "I hear you're the wicked woman who doesn't even care for her mother-in-law." It turned out these visitors were my mother-in-law's siblings and their spouses. She had spread false tales about me, accusing me of neglecting her by not feeding her properly and not letting her bathe. As the youngest of 4, she had a large support network, and now, with their spouses included, there were 8 elderly people in my living room, all labeling me as a demon wife deserving of retribution. Their accusations made my heart race with fear. "This is a misunderstanding," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. But the eldest brother raised his voice, pounding his cane on the floor. "Stop making excuses," he bellowed. The others joined in, demanding that I apologize and reflect on my supposed wrongdoings. Just then, my husband arrived, drawn by the commotion. When my mother-in-law's brother criticized my upbringing, I waited for him to defend me, but instead, he joined in, adding his own criticisms. In that moment, my affection for him vanished. I had always believed my husband to be a kind man, but living with my mother-in-law had shown me the truth. He wasn't kind, he was simply weak, easily swayed by those around him, and unable to stand up to any pressure. During the heated exchange, one of my mother-in-law's brothers even suggested that we get a divorce. To my horror, everyone seemed to agree. My mother-in-law then offered me a so-called second chance, but only if I promised to change and serve both her and my husband better in the future. Trying to hold back tears, her siblings urged me to be grateful, claiming that I would never find a kinder mother-in-law anywhere else. They even decided to implement a rotating schedule, taking turns each week to check if I was keeping up with the housework and attending to my husband and mother-in-law's needs adequately. Once their plans were set, everyone appeared content and left to celebrate with a sushi outing. As they departed, my mother-in-law couldn't resist a parting shot, telling me to ensure the house was clean and the laundry done by the time they returned. Alone in the cluttered living room, I was left to wonder how everything had escalated to this point. Tears began to well up. Our marriage had been happy until my mother-in-law's interference. Now, despite all my efforts, I found myself the subject of complaints from all of them. The tears streamed down my face, a mix of sadness, regret, and anger. A few hours later, my husband and mother-in-law came home. I was still sitting in the disarrayed living room when my mother-in-law smirked at me. "See, we don't need a wife who can't do housework," she sneered. "I told you to clean up earlier, didn't I?" Seemingly tipsy, she demanded that I leave immediately. My husband, grinning, joined in, probably thinking his support would make me comply quietly. But I had reached my limit. I no longer had any desire to do anything for them. "Fine, I'll leave then," I said calmly, standing up. As I turned to leave, I heard my mother-in-law and husband laughing, probably assuming I was bluffing. But their reactions didn't matter to me anymore. I went to my room, packed my things, and left without another word. A week later, my mother-in-law called me, panicked. "Andrew says he has no money." "What does that mean?" she asked frantically. I responded bluntly, "Andrew earns only a third of what I do. I've been covering most of our expenses. The house is in my name, and I'm planning to sell it, so you'll need to leave soon." She thought I was joking until I urged her to check the bank statements in her drawer. There was silence on the other end of the phone as the reality of the situation sank in. Then, the begging started. She pleaded for me to return, saying Andrew was lonely. But I was resolute. "I'm proceeding with a divorce through my lawyer," I told her, ending the call and ignoring her tearful apologies. With the help of my lawyer, I filed for divorce, citing my mother-in-law's unbearable behavior and my husband's lack of support. The divorce was granted quickly, and I even received a small settlement. When I explained the situation to my children, they were supportive, agreeing that the fault lay squarely with my husband and his mother. After the divorce, I sold the house, and my ex-husband and mother-in-law were forced to move out and stay with relatives temporarily. Their stay was short-lived, though, as they soon had to find a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet on his modest income. From what I've heard, they now spend their days blaming each other for their misfortunes. Meanwhile, my ex-husband has been sending frequent messages asking for reconciliation, claiming he's cut ties with his mother. But these messages have become more of a nuisance than anything, and I'm considering blocking him to maintain my peace. Without their constant criticism, I feel liberated. I'm ready to live my life on my own terms, focusing on my own fulfillment and well-being.
I've officially transferred the ownership of our house to my parents, and we're contemplating divorce. James, with a cold demeanor, pointed at me and callously insisted that I leave the house. He unleashed a stream of insults, supported by his parents' cheerful smiles, who seemed to silently endorse his actions. Nevertheless, I remained unfazed by their words, calmly accepting the decision to leave. Inside me, a well-thought-out plan accompanied the luggage I had prepared in advance. Hand in hand, I departed from the house without hesitation. They were oblivious to the gravity of the situation awaiting them. My name is Sally, just turned 50. Many years have passed since our marriage. Our children are now independent, leading lives away from us. I used to live the life of an ordinary salaried worker, but now, thanks to a friend's introduction, I spend my days as a teacher of handmade accessories, a hobby turned profession. This new job has become a turning point in my life, bringing fulfillment through interactions with my students and the joy of crafting every day. Some might have negative opinions about turning a hobby into a livelihood, but I am content. James and I met by chance at the company where I used to work. He was employed at a client company at the time, and as we started to meet often through work-related social gatherings, our relationship deepened. Eventually, we chose to marry out of love. After 3 years of marriage, our family was blessed with a healthy and energetic boy. He graduated from a well-known university and is now happily married, living a prosperous life. However, despite our son's success, the relationship between James and me became increasingly difficult to find joy in. Over the years, James underwent a transformation, displaying changes in behavior. The once gentle and considerate James became demanding, treating me like nothing more than a housemaid. His daily changing demands and preferences became a source of trouble for me. Lately, James has been easily angered, blaming me for trivial things and instances of verbal abuse have been on the rise. I've been wanting to escape this life and start anew, but I'm tied down by an unpaid mortgage. Despite this, James quit his job without a clear reason and now spends his days lazing around the house. He hardly lifts a finger to help with daily chores, leaving me to manage everything on my own. The house we live in was recently rebuilt, and I funded it all. Managing the finances, I saved bit by bit for its reconstruction. It embodies my wishes and aspirations, a house I worked hard to build. I don't want it to fall into James's hands if I leave. Beyond the mortgage issue, this house symbolizes my dreams, with features like the spacious kitchen area reflecting my careful choices. Despite initial input from James on the house's design, I covered all the costs and wanted my wishes to be respected. Despite facing challenges, the house, with all its desired features, eventually became a reality, fulfilling our dream. I experienced a profound sense of joy about the reality of our new home. However, the cost of construction significantly surpassed our initial estimates, compelling us to take on a much larger loan than anticipated. Accepting such a substantial loan in our 50s was unexpected, but the prospect of the happiness our new home promised provided us with the energy to overcome this financial burden. On the flip side, James appeared somewhat sulky, as his opinions and wishes were not well reflected in the house design. He expressed discontent, considering it unnecessary and akin to throwing money down the drain. Ignoring his complaints and grumbles, I pressed on. Gradually, he stopped talking to me and began resorting to childish behaviors, such as scattering trash and leaving things disorganized to provoke irritation. I wondered when this situation, this life, would come to an end, pondering these thoughts every day. A few months had passed since we moved into the new house when suddenly the doorbell rang. We weren't expecting any visitors that day, leaving me curious about who it might be. As I prepared to go to the front door, James, surprisingly, got up and headed there before me, possibly aware of the visitor's identity. After a while, cheerful voices and laughter emanated from the entrance. When the door to the living room slowly opened, revealing the visitors, I saw the faces of my unexpected in-laws, Harold and Alice. Honestly, I always felt pressure in my relationship with them. When we first announced our marriage, they treated me coldly, criticized me for my lower social status, and maintained an awkward attitude even on our wedding day. Their interference continued post-marriage, and each time I interacted with them, I wondered how to handle the situation. Despite thinking there had been some change or settling down due to lack of contact, their sudden visit surprised me. Greeting them politely, I felt a slight tension, but they passed by me without a word, intentionally ignoring my presence and bumping into my shoulder. They marveled at the house, expressing envy at the spacious and user-friendly kitchen. James proudly showcased the house to his in-laws, and upon their return, the expressions on their faces seemed satisfied. However, James' expression turned stern, and he suddenly raised his voice in anger towards me, instructing me to hurry up and prepare tea and snacks. Overwhelmed by his words, I hastily prepared tea and served snacks, but his parents seemed dissatisfied, commenting on the hospitality. Despite my efforts, Harold expressed dissatisfaction, and as they quickly finished the snacks and tea, he commented appreciatively on the house's interior. James, with a broad smile, invited his parents to live together in the house, almost ignoring my presence. They listened to James's words and left, leaving me watching their retreating figures. I felt a significant gap between James and me, witnessing him chatting and laughing joyfully with his parents, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Subsequently, in response to James' invitation, his parents began visiting our house more frequently. Initially, it was a few times a month, but it gradually increased to several times a week, eventually becoming almost daily. However, their criticisms towards me never ceased, and James showed no signs of curbing them. James' attitude of blaming me, coupled with his parents' intensified disapproval, became more pronounced. His complaints about me not listening and causing our son suffering were relentless. Despite facing daily difficulties, I found myself unable to voice the frustration in my heart. All I could do was offer words of apology. The in-laws' visits increased beyond anticipation, and they started visiting even more frequently during my absence. They would come along with James, leaving clear evidence of their activities at home: scattered beer cans, empty bottles, and traces of spilled alcohol that seeped into our new rug. Despite my protests, the new house began to smell of alcohol and felt dirty. I couldn't understand why, despite not contributing to the household, James was quick to complain. His involvement in gambling added another layer of worry, as remnants of used betting slips surfaced regularly. Explaining the risks of gambling and its impact on our finances seemed futile. The losses were a significant blow, especially since the money used for gambling was hard-earned through my tireless work. Nearly a month into the frequent visits from the in-laws, they targeted the times when I was out. One day, returning home early, I found them leisurely spending time in our house. Surprised, I confronted them, but their snarky words and indifferent attitude made it clear that they considered my presence bothersome. Frustrated and stressed by the insolent attitudes of James and his parents, I realized I had reached my limit. Instead of succumbing to emotions, I decided it was time to devise a plan to address the situation. Amidst this turmoil, an unusual event occurred. During a time when I was supposed to be away, the in-laws visited unexpectedly, expressing surprise at their unusual timing. I sarcastically commented on their avoidance of my presence. Ignoring my remark, they boldly entered the house. James welcomed them with a smile, leading them to inspect various areas, from the kitchen to the bathroom. Observing their meticulous checks, I sensed a hidden agenda behind their actions. Even as they left, they wore satisfied expressions, as if they had confirmed something. Curious and wary, I questioned their inspections and wondered if there was something they should tell me. I had cautioned James not to worry, emphasizing that it was none of his business. His behavior, however, hinted at concealing something from me. I suspected he was trying to manipulate me cunningly, but grasping the real intention proved challenging. Observing the situation became my only option. Then, one day after work, I returned home to find a large moving truck parked in front of our house, bearing the logo of a company named Moving Center. James appeared to be in discussions with the truck driver and representatives. When our eyes met, he pretended not to see me and disappeared inside the house. What shocked me more was the simultaneous arrival of my in-laws. They greeted me casually, and James welcomed them, leading them into the house. The atmosphere felt tense, and as I followed them inside, I noticed a significant change. The familiar furniture and belongings I knew had vanished, replaced by my in-laws' dated furniture, arranged as if this were their home. As I sat down on the sofa, they surrounded me with smirky smiles, conveying a sense of smugness. Their behavior indicated a pre-planned action, and though anxious, I decided to quietly wait and see what would unfold. The somewhat hurried gazes of my in-laws added to the atmosphere. They declared that there was something they needed to tell me, hinting at a hidden agenda. Bracing myself, I responded with feigned calmness, and James sighed deeply before admitting that he had sold the house to his parents. He proposed getting a divorce, and my in-laws nodded in agreement. Their smirky smiles suggested they were trying to toy with me. Despite their revelation, I remained unfazed, having anticipated their plan. I promptly signed the divorce papers, placed my wedding ring on the table, and declared my intention to leave the house. I had suspicions about the unnatural behaviors of James and my in-laws, especially since their frequent visits when I wasn't home. To confirm my suspicions, I installed surveillance cameras around the house, sensed with my smartphone. On the first day, I observed their daily conversations. However, one day, I stumbled upon footage where James and his parents joyfully discussed selling the house. Shocked by this revelation, I decided to plan my next steps, searching for a new residence based on the information obtained from the surveillance cameras. I took the initiative to transfer the home loan from my name to James's. If they planned to remove me from our home, I believed they should take over the mortgage payments and responsibilities. The monthly mortgage, amounting to $1,900, was paid from my hard-earned salary. Doubting that James and his parents could afford this, I resolved not to provide any financial assistance. Free from the troublesome relationship, I moved to my new, well-arranged home with new furniture, ready to embark on a new chapter in my life. On my day off, I relished the prospect of thorough rest, sleeping in past noon. As I was about to doze off again, the doorbell abruptly rang. To my surprise, James and his in-laws stood at my doorstep, uninvited. I questioned their presence, and without answering, they intruded into my house, spreading out a document in front of me. They accused me of changing the name on the house loan without permission. Expressing disbelief at their sudden appearance, I learned that right after leaving the house, they received documents about the loan name change. James and his parents were shocked, claiming they were currently unemployed and couldn't afford the high monthly loan. In a furious outburst, James declared they wouldn't pay that amount. Attempting to enlighten them on the consequences of defaulting, I explained how interest and late fees could significantly increase the final payment. James initially seemed skeptical, but after searching for information online, his expression turned to one of shock and distress. I recommended looking for new employment for a fresh start. Their faces grew even paler as they realized the seriousness of the situation. They admitted to having no savings or assets, with James burdened by substantial gambling debts and no stable income. Frustrated, they pleaded for understanding and assistance, emphasizing the years they spent together. Unmoved by their pleas, I shut the door to escape their attempts to mend the relationship. Frustrated, they reported me to the police, leading to their removal from my property. Eventually, due to financial constraints, they relocated to a more affordable apartment on the outskirts of town. James secured a part-time job, supporting his family with that income. Meanwhile, my life remained unchanged, and I focused on my job. In my free time, I started a blog on handmade crafts, gaining attention and doubling my monthly income. Requests for me to serve as an instructor for workshops and courses increased. I had no thoughts of remarrying and planned to navigate life independently. Discovering an old household account book from the early days of my marriage brought back memories of our financial struggles. With a sense of resolve, I decided to build a new happiness on my own, placing the account book back on the shelf.